Welcome back to Chapter 5 of 6 of my free full-stack Spring Security with React Employee Management System course. If you missed the first 4 chapters, I would highly recommend starting the course from the beginning before starting this chapter, as you'll be missing important code and context for this chapter and beyond. With that being said, as always, I'm Ethan, or Unencoder, your favorite underqualified senior software engineer. As I mentioned before, I'm going to be uploading the course as a short series here on YouTube. Through the free version of the course, anyone can watch the course as each chapter is uploaded on YouTube and follow along line by line. However, if you want full access to the course and the course materials instantly without waiting, there is still time to purchase a paid version of the course before I release the course in its entirety on YouTube. As I have mentioned before, I'm providing a couple paid versions of the course to grant you this access. The first paid option will grant you immediate access to the entire course, along with the private resources in the course at a fixed price of $15 to the course tier channel membership. This also grants you access to any other courses currently released at the time of having an active membership. The second option will also grant you immediate access to the entire course and all of its resources at a price provided by Udemy. I'll provide a link to the Udemy course in the description below, and I'll also attempt to run as many promotions as possible on Udemy to help you all save some money on the course as well. But ultimately, I will be allowing Udemy to price the course at what they believe it's worth. No matter which option you choose to follow along with, I please ask that you leave a like on the course videos that you do watch, as it is a completely free way to support the hard work I put in to put this project together for you for free. And if you want to see upcoming courses and other software projects, I would highly recommend subscribing, because I upload programming videos typically twice a week. Now, with that being said, let's go and hop into our goals for the 5th chapter of this course. In this chapter, we want to focus on wrapping up the remaining business logic for our backend. This is going to go ahead and include the logic and requirements surrounding the manager type employee. The primary function of the manager type employees in our system is to be able to review timesheets, and then once those timesheets are reviewed, there should be a payroll process which turns those hours worked into pay stubs. To handle this logic, we'll generate a couple more entities and logic surrounding running a payroll, which will be assigned to the admin role employees. Then we'll go ahead and add the new pages for the manager type employee to view the reports, as well as view all the timesheets that need to be reviewed. We'll also set up an interface for the manager to review and leave feedback on the timesheets before approving them for the payroll. Finally, we will set up the logic and the components to allow the admin role employees to run the payroll, and a preview of the payroll and display the pay stubs that we generated during the payroll being run. If that all sounds good to you, let's go ahead and open up our backend code and get to work on the Java application, setting up our new entities for pay stubs. And able to set up the rest of the pay logic, we need to create a new entity for our pay stubs. To do this, let's go ahead and go into our entity package. Go ahead and make a new class. We're going to go ahead and call this pay stub. And then let's go ahead and close out of our project explorer here. Since we're going to be storing this inside the database, we need to go ahead and ensure our base entity class to go ahead and bring in our create timestamp, our update timestamp, and our ID. And we're also going to go ahead and be sorting these pay stubs by date. So we also want to go ahead and implement comparable. Let's go ahead and import comparable. And of course, this is going to be on the type of pay stub. Cool. Now let's come above. We'll deal with the method that we need to implement later. Above, let's go ahead and throw on the entity annotation to tell Spring Boot that this is going to be stored in the database. Go and import entity. Next, let's also go ahead and import our @table annotation. Go and import that. And then inside table, we're going to go ahead and set the name equal to pay stubs. Now we're at the point we go ahead and bring in our general purpose long block. So let's go ahead and say no args constructors. Import that. Let's also go ahead and say all args constructor. Import that guy, and let's also go ahead and bring in @data, import that, and finally let's also go ahead and bring in @builder, just in case we need to go ahead and build these. Finally, let's go and import builder. That looks good. Let's also go ahead and just implement this method really quick. That way it's not mad at us, and we need to go ahead and implement this compare to. Again, we'll do this in a second. We just want to get that red out of here. Looks good. Now let's go ahead and start setting up the different fields for our pay stub entity. Starting out, we'll go ahead and want a private employee. Above our employee, let's go ahead and bring in @menu to 1. Go ahead and import that. And then below @menu to 1, we'll also have our @join column. Also bring in join column. Inside join column, we're going to say name is equal to employee ID. That is good for keeping track of who we are paying. Next, let's go ahead and set up when they're being paid. So let's go ahead and say private local date pay date. Let's go ahead and bring in our local date here. And above, let's also go ahead and say @column, import column, and inside we're going to go and say name is equal to date underscore paid. That should be good for our pay date. Next up, let's go ahead and keep track of how many hours are paid for. So say private double gross hours. Above, once again, let's go and include @column. And inside column, we'll go and say name is equal to gross underscore hours. Moving on, let's go ahead and say private big decimal gross pay to keep track of their total pay. We need to go ahead and import our big decimal class here, and then come above, we'll go ahead and say @column again. Inside @column, we'll go ahead and give it a name equal to gross_pay. Next, let's go ahead and set up a private double regular hours to keep track of the regular hours we paid them for. Once again, we'll include an @column above. We'll go ahead and name this regular_hours. Next, we want to go ahead and keep track of the regular pay. So let's go ahead and say private big decimal regular pay. Above it again, let's include @column, and inside @column, we'll go ahead and say name is equal to regular_pay. Next, we want to go ahead and keep track of our overtime hours. So let's go ahead and say private double overtime hours. Above our overtime hours, let's go ahead and add the @column annotation. And inside @column, we'll go ahead and include name equal to overtime_hours. And finally, we want to go ahead and also keep track of the overtime pay. So we're going to go ahead and say private big decimal overtime pay. Once again, we'll come above and add in the @column. And inside @column, we'll go ahead and say name is equal to overtime pay. Looks good for all of our properties. The finally we need to go ahead and do is set up our compare to function here. So we're going to go ahead and just rename this pay stub to pay stub in here. That just looks a little bit nicer. And then instead of returning 0, let's go ahead and return get paydate.compareTo. And then we're going to go ahead and compare it to paystub.getPaydate. So whenever we go to sort these, we're going to go ahead and just compare them by their pay dates, and that's how we're going to go and sort them. So that should go ahead and do it for all the fields of the paystub entity. Now we can go ahead and restart our application and make sure all the tables show up properly inside of our H2 database. So let's go ahead and give this a nice refresh here. Everything started up, that looks good. Let's go ahead and hop in the browser to the H2 database. So let's go ahead and connect to our H2 database. And now we can go ahead and see that we have our pay stubs here. Run this, it has our date paid, our employee ID, gross hours, gross pay, ID, overtime hours, overtime pay, regular hours, regular pay, and our create and update timestamp. So everything is there and everything is working. So that looks good. Now let's go ahead and hop back into IntelliJ and get our repository set up. Now that we have successfully generated the database table for our pay stubs, we need to set up our ability to create and fetch data from the database table. To do this, let's go ahead and create a new interface inside of our repositories package here. So new in Java class, make an interface, and this is going to go ahead and be our pay stub and then repository. Let's go ahead and open this up. Looks good. Let's get rid of our Project Explorer here. And then as always, we want to go ahead and extend our JPA repository. Let's go and import JPA repository, and then inside of our angled brackets, we want to go ahead and include paystub and integer because we're going to be fetching type paystub and the integer is the ID type. Let's go ahead and import our paystub and then come above, and we'll also go ahead and throw @repository on it just for good measure. Let's go and import our @repository from Spring Framework, and that looks good. Now we're going to go ahead and have a few methods inside of our repository that are kind of custom. So the first thing that we need is to go ahead and just get all the paystubs by a specific employee. So to do that, we're going to go and say public list of paystubs, find all by employee. Let's go ahead and import our list here. That way it's not mad at us. And then we need to go ahead and pass in employee to go ahead and find those paystubs. Let's go ahead and import our employee here, and that looks good. The next one that we need is to go ahead and get paystubs between a specific start and end date. So for example, if we only want to fetch the paystubs for this year or whatever. So to do that one, we're going to go and say public list paystub, and this one's going to be called find all by employee and create timestamp between. And inside of our method parameters, we're going to go ahead and pass in employee. We also need to go ahead and pass in an instant create timestamp start. And finally, we need an instant create timestamp end. Let's go ahead and clean this up. So let's go ahead and import this. And this is a little bit long. So let's just go ahead and bring this down like so. That way we're within the limits here. So it looks good. It's a little bit ugly, but what can you do? So that should go ahead and do it for all the custom functionality that we need inside of our paystub repository. And now before we get into finishing up the pay functionality, we need to actually go ahead and hop into the timesheet repository and add a couple of new method stubs there. So let's go ahead and navigate into our timesheet repository, make sure that's saved, and then come into our timesheet repository. There we go. Let's come below the function we already had here. And then let's go ahead and start out by just being able to get all by specific status. So let's go ahead and say list of timesheet, find all by status. And then let's go ahead and import our list here. Looks good. And then inside of find by status, we're going to go ahead and pass in timesheet status. Very good. Looks good. We might also need to go ahead and import our timesheet status here. So this is basically going to allow us to check for specific statuses. So for the manager to go ahead and get all the ones that are ready to be approved more or less. And then we also need a way to go ahead and get the specific ones for a specific manager more or less. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and say list of timesheet, find all by employee in and status. And then inside the method parameters, we're going to go ahead and pass in a list of employee called employees. And then we're also going to go ahead and pass in a timesheet status of status. And that should go ahead and do it for this. Let's just make sure we don't need to import employee. Perfect. So I got a little bit ahead of myself. This one is most likely going to be to go ahead and get all the timesheets. That way we can go ahead and run payroll. And this one will be for passing in all of the employees that a manager manages, as well as the timesheet stats that they want to get. That way we can go ahead and get them for the manager. So that should go ahead and do it for all of the repository functionality for this section of the course. So now we need to go ahead and make some changes to our timesheet service, and obviously also go ahead and set up the pay stub service. That way people can get paid. Now that we have all of our repository logic done, we need to go ahead and set up the ability for our managers to actually approve and deny timesheets. So to do that, let's go ahead and hop into the timesheet service here. Let's go ahead and open up the timesheet service. We need to go ahead and just make a couple functions. They don't necessarily matter where they go. I just kind of like to put things that are like near one another. So for example, here we have the create or read timesheet for employees. Let's just go ahead and come below this guy. And we need to go ahead and start out by setting it up so the managers can actually get the timesheets that they need to approve. So let's go ahead and just declare a public list timesheet. And we'll go ahead and call this read managers timesheets to approve. And inside of the method parameters, we're going to go ahead and pass in a list of employee called employees. Let's go and open up this method, and inside we're going to go ahead and return timesheet repository.find all by employee in and status. We want to go ahead and pass in the employees that we got from our request, as well as timesheet status.submitted, which means it hasn't been approved yet. There we go. That looks good. That'll go ahead and get all of the timesheets for a manager. Next, we need to go ahead and set up a way to read all the timesheets for the payroll. So let's go ahead and come down below here again, and let's go ahead and say public list of timesheet, read timesheets for payroll. And then in here, let's just go and open up this function. And inside, we're just going to go ahead and return timesheet repository.find all by status. And inside the method parameter, we're going to go and pass in timesheet status.approved. That looks good. Now we can go ahead and come below our update timesheet hours or update timesheet status probably. That's kind of close to what we're doing here. We need a way for the manager to actually approve or deny a timesheet. So let's go ahead and declare a method called public timesheet approve or deny timesheet. Inside of our method parameters, let's go and pass in an integer timesheet ID. We also want to go ahead and pass in a timesheet status. We'll pass in the employee approver. And finally, we'll pass in any string of message for the denial reason. Let's open up our method here. First thing we need to go ahead and do is retrieve the timesheet. So we're going to go ahead and say timesheet is equal to retrieve timesheet by ID or throw timesheet does not exist exception. Inside, let's go and pass in the timesheet ID passed into the method parameter. If we have successfully grabbed the timesheet, let's go ahead and say timesheet.setStatus to the status passed in. We'll also go ahead and say timesheet.setApprover to the approver passed in. And finally, we need to go ahead and set if there's any messages. So we'll say timesheet.setMessage to the message passed in. Finally, let's go ahead and say return timesheet repository.save timesheet to go ahead and persist that and return it back to the manager. That looks good for that method. Next, we want to go ahead and set up a quick utility function just for data creation purposes. That way we can go ahead and generate a list of timesheets for an employee. That way we can go ahead and also generate a bunch of pay stubs. So we're going to go ahead and just come above this private timesheet, the retrieve timesheet by ID or throw timesheet does not exist exception. And I'm going to go ahead and just declare a public list of timesheets. This is going to be called generate timesheets for payroll tests. And inside we're going to have an employee, and we'll have an employee manager. Let's open up our method, and inside we're going to go ahead and say list of timesheets generated is equal to a new array list. Then we're also going to go ahead and say random rand is equal to a new random. Let's go and import our random object here. Maybe. There we go. And then below here, we're going to say local date, working date is equal to local date.of. And we're going to go ahead and base this off the first day or first working week of 2025 year, which is 2024, 12, 29. Then we're also going to go ahead and base it off of today. So I don't know when we're actually going to be able to test this. I don't know when this is actually going to come out, but we're going to go and say local date today is equal to local date.now. And we're going to go ahead and say .-7 to go ahead and get 7 days prior to now. And the reasoning because of this is because we want to go ahead and keep at least one timesheet for us to fill out if we go ahead and generate a bunch of them. Obviously, we don't want to go ahead and generate and approve this week's timesheet and not have anything to approve this week. So that looks good. Now we want to go ahead and set up a while loop that'll watch the working date is before today. And this is basically just going to go ahead and loop through from the first week of 2025 all the way to today. So let's go and say while working date is before today. Go ahead and open this up. And while this is the case, we're going to go ahead and say timesheet is equal to timesheet.builder. Inside, we're going to say .employee is employee. We're going to say .start date is the working date. Our end date will be working date plus 6 days. We'll set our regular hours to 40.0. We're going to call it .overtime hours. And inside, we're going to have a math.ceil. And inside math.ceil, we're going to say rand.nextDouble of 21.0. And this will basically get us some overtime hours between 0 and 20 hours for that week. Next, we'll go ahead and say approver is manager. Status will be timesheet status.approved. Our hours will be an empty list by saying list.of. And finally, we'll call .build. After we build it, let's come below our timesheet builder. We'll go ahead and say timesheet is equal to timesheet repository.save timesheet. And then we also want to go ahead and say, whoops, I came outside of our while loop. Let's make sure that we're stay inside the while loop, outside the builder. There we go. And then finally, we'll go ahead and say timesheets generated.add timesheet. And then to ensure that we don't have an infinite loop, we need to go ahead and say working date is equal to working date plus days of 7. Now finally, let's go ahead and come outside and we'll go ahead and say return timesheets generated. There we go. Looks good. Basically, all this is going to go ahead and do is loop through the first week of 2025 pay, basically, up to now, minus 7 days. That way we have at least one timesheet to fill out for this week and generate some random timesheet data. That way, whenever we go to test our pay stubs and make sure they're generating properly, and also just trying to view some stuff on the front end, we can actually see all that stuff. So that should go ahead and wrap it up for all the logic needed inside of our timesheet service. Next, we need to go ahead and set up a quick DTO before setting up the rest of the logic to process our payrolls. As mentioned in the end of the last section, we're all good to go for our timesheet service. And now we want to go ahead and start setting up our pay stub service. But before we do that, we need to go ahead and set up a quick DTO class. Let's go ahead and open up our project, go into our DTO. Go ahead and right click, make a new Java class, and let's go ahead and make this a record. We're going to go ahead and call this the pay and roll, and we're going to go ahead and call this preview DTO, because whenever we want to go ahead and preview the payroll, it's going to be slightly different than actually run the payroll, so we want slightly different objects. Let's go ahead and open this up, close out our project explorer. Let's go and go above, and we're going to go ahead and throw add data above it, just so we can get the data easier. And I'm sorry, this actually should be a class, so let's go ahead and make this back into a class. Sorry if I'm whiplashing you guys a little bit. Above, we actually want at data. We also want at builder. Let's go and import at builder, and that's all we want for now. Let's go ahead and come inside. Let's go ahead and come inside of our class here, and let's start setting up the properties. So first, we want to go ahead and bring in a private string employee, which is just going to be their email. We also want to go ahead and bring a private local date payment date. Let's go ahead and bring in our local date here. After payment date, we also want a private big decimal gross pay. Let's go ahead and import our big decimal. And like I mentioned, the goal of our payroll preview is just to make sure everything looks proper, make sure everyone's getting paid, make sure all the timesheets are there and the payments look correct before we actually go through and generate the official pay stubs. So with that being handled, let's go and open up our Project Explorer once again, come into our services, and let's go ahead and make the class to handle all the logic for our pay stubs. Let's go ahead and make a pay and stub service class. Let's go ahead and open this up, close out of our Project Explorer, and we're good to go. We can also go ahead and close out of a couple of things here that we no longer need. And let's go ahead and come above here. And first, let's go ahead and say at service. Let's go and import our at service. And we also want to go ahead and bring in at transactional. Go and import that. And then finally, we're going to have some dependencies in here. So let's also go ahead and bring in at required args constructor. Looks good. Let's go ahead and come set up our dependencies. So first we need access to the pay stub repository. So let's go ahead and say private final, pay stub repository, pay stub repository. Let's go and bring in our pay stub repository here. Cool. Next we need access to the timesheet service. So we'll say private final timesheet service, timesheet service. And finally we need access to the employee service. So we'll say private final employee service, employee service. Looks good. First thing I want to go ahead and do is set up a private utility function inside here to calculate how much pay an hourly employee is going to make. To do that, let's go ahead and say private big decimal, calculate hourly gross pay. And then let's go ahead and import our big decimal here and then come inside our method parameters. We're going to have employee. Let's go and import our employee here. We're going to go ahead and have the regular hours, which will be called double regular. And we'll have our overtime hours, which we'll call double overtime. Let's go and open this up. And this is going to get pretty ugly pretty fast, but it is what it is, I guess, type situation. So the first thing that we're going to go ahead and do is say big decimal regular pay is equal to employee.getPayInformation. Then we're going to go ahead and call .getPayAmount.multiply. And inside the multiply, we're going to go and pass in a new big decimal with our regular hours. Okay, then we come below and we're going to go ahead and say big decimal overtime pay is equal to employee.getPayInformation again. Then we're going to go ahead and call .getPayAmount.multiply again. Inside, we're going to go and pass in a new big decimal of 1.5. Then coming outside, we need to go ahead and call .multiply again. And inside this multiply, we need to go ahead and pass in a new big decimal of overtime hours. I told y'all this is going to get pretty gross. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and return a new big decimal. And here we're going to pass in regular pay.long value plus overtime pay.long value. And finally, we're going to go ahead and call .setScale to 2 and rounding mode.half up. And it's a little bit ugly, but that should go ahead and do it. Let's go and import this rounding mode. Also, let's just go ahead and make this look a little bit prettier. So we'll go ahead and just bring in multiply down there. That way it's not going too far. And also go ahead and bring in .setScale down there. There we go. So that part is a little bit ugly, but it is what it is. You got to do what you got to do. Next up, we want to go and set up another private utility method that returns a pay stub called generate pay stub for timesheet. So we're going to go below our private big decimal. We're going to go ahead and say private pay stub generate pay stub from timesheet. Let's go ahead and first bring in the pay stub. I hope that didn't just create a new class. Let's undo that. I don't know what that did. Import class, that's better. Come inside our method parameters, we're going to go ahead and pass in a timesheet called timesheet. We might need to also import our timesheet here. There we go. And then let's go ahead and open up the method here. Inside, first we're going to say employee is equal to timesheet.getEmployee. Let's go and import our employee if we need to. Looks like it is good to go. Perfect. Then we're also going to say double regular hours is equal to timesheet.getRegular hours. Next, we're going to go ahead and say double overtime hours is equal to timesheet.getOvertime hours. Then we're going to go and say big decimal amount is equal to employee.getPayInformation.getPayAmount. Looks good. Now we can come start doing some logic. First, we want to go ahead and call timesheet service.update timesheet status. Since we are generating the pay stub, it's going to be set to paid now. Inside of the update timesheet status, we're going to go ahead and pass in timesheet.getID. As well as timesheet status.paid. Let's go and import our timesheet status here. And then now we can go ahead and start setting up our pay stub. Let's go ahead and say return paystub.builder. And inside of our paystub.builder, we're going to go ahead and pass in .employee is equal to the employee. We need to go ahead and set pay date to timesheet.getIndDate. Of course, this is assuming that we go ahead and submit it like on the last day or whatever. Realistically, in the real world, this will probably be like done the week after if you're paying in arrears or whatever. But for our purposes, since we go ahead and generate a bunch of timesheets all at once, we're going to go ahead and base it off the end of the timesheet. Next, we're going to go ahead and say gross hours is regular hours plus overtime hours. Next, we're going to say .gross pay. Inside gross pay, we're going to go ahead and call the private calculate hourly gross pay function. We're going to go ahead and pass in the employee, the regular hours, and the overtime hours. Next, let's set our regular hours to regular hours. So overtime hours to overtime hours. And now we get to have some big decimal fun again, just to go ahead and get the pay and whatnot. So let's go ahead and say .regular pay. Inside regular pay, we're going to say amount.multiply. And inside multiply, we're going to go ahead and pass in a new big decimal of regular hours. Coming outside of that multiply, let's go ahead and call .setScale to 2 and rounding mode half up again. Hopefully I didn't mess up parentheses there. Let's come below and also say .overtime pay. Once again, we need to do all the fun stuff again. So let's go ahead and say amount.multiply. Inside here, go ahead and pass in a new big decimal of 1.5. We'll come outside that multiply and go ahead and call .multiply again. Inside this multiply, we're going to go ahead and pass in a new big decimal with overtime hours. Finally, we'll come outside of that multiply and say .setScale to 2 and rounding mode half up. Once again, fingers crossed we didn't mess up any other parentheses. Final thing we need to go ahead and do is just call .build. Now let's see, looks like all the errors went away, it looks good. There's probably a way to make this look prettier here, so we can go ahead and do something like that. We can go ahead and bring the multiply down. There we go, that looks a little bit better. We could probably also go ahead and bring the set scale down. There we go, just kind of clean that up a little bit. That should go ahead and do it for all of our utility functions. Now we should be able to start setting up the actual logic for creating some timestamps and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and come up above where all of our privates are. The first thing we'll go ahead and do is just get a simple list of all the pay stubs for an employee. So to do that, let's go ahead and say public list pay stub, read pay stubs for employee. Let's go ahead and bring in our list really quick. And then inside of our method parameters, let's go and pass in a string email. Let's open up our method, and the first thing we'll do is say employee is equal to employee service.read employee by email. Come inside of this method and pass in email. Once we have our employee, we can come below and go and say list of pay stubs is equal to pay stub repository.find all by employee. Here we'll go ahead and pass in the employee from above. And since we went ahead and implemented that comparable interface, we can go ahead and call collections.sort here. We can go ahead and import collections really quick. But then we can go ahead and pass in the pay stubs, and it'll sort those pay stubs for us automatically. Final thing that we need to go ahead and do is let's make sure we return and make sure we spell pay stubs properly. The final thing that we need to go ahead and do is just return those pay stubs. There we go. That'll go ahead and allow employees to view their pay stubs. It's going to be on the pay information window whenever they go into their manage self page. Next up, we need to go ahead and just get them specifically for like a 1 year window. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and say public list pay stub, read pay stubs for employee of year. Inside here, let's go ahead and pass in a string email and a string year. Let's open this up. Inside, we're going to go and say employee is equal to employee service.read employee by email again. Let's go and pass in that email here. Next, let's go and say list of pay stubs is equal to pay stub repository.find all by employee. Let's pass in that employee from above. Then we're going to go ahead and call .stream. Then we're going to go ahead and call .filter each stub. Open this up, and here we're going to go ahead and set up a local date is equal to local date.of instant. Let's go ahead and import our local date here. It looks fine. And then we're going to go and say stub.get create timestamp, comma, and zone ID.get system default. We might need to go ahead and import our zone ID. That's fine. Then we're going to go ahead and come below here. I'm going to return date.get year is equal to integer.parseInt of year. Let it go ahead and just only get the ones for this year. Finally, let's go ahead and say .collect. And inside collect, we're going to go ahead and say collectors.toList. And let's go ahead and import our collectors here. There we go. It's mad at us because we probably could have done something slightly different, but I don't really care, IntelliJ. And finally, we're going to go ahead and call collections.sort to make sure those are sorted properly. And let's go ahead and pass in that pay stub list. Then finally, we'll go ahead and return the pay stubs. There we go. That looks good for getting them for an employee for a specific year. Let's come below this one and continue working here. Next up, we need to go ahead and set up the ability to do a preview for the payroll. So to do that, let's go ahead and say public list payroll preview DTO. Preview payroll. We're going to go ahead and import our preview payroll DTO, and let's just open this up. This isn't going to take any parameters. First thing we want to go ahead and do is say local date payroll date is equal to local date.now. Next up, let's also go ahead and say list of payroll preview DTO. Payroll preview DTOs is equal to a new array list. Let's go ahead and import our array list class here. Then we're going to come below. And next, we want to go ahead and declare a list of employees equal to employee service.read all employees. And now we need to go ahead and split these employees into two buckets. We need the salary, which is going to be a base pay, whatever. And we also need the hourly. So first, let's go ahead and say list of payroll preview, salary payroll preview is equal to employees.stream. Then we're going to go ahead and call .filter. And we're going to filter employee is equal to employee.get pay information.get pay type equals pay type of salary. All right, let's go and import our pay type here. We'll come below .filter. We're going to go ahead and call .map employee. And then inside the map, we're going to go ahead and say big decimal pay is equal to employee.get pay information.get amount.divide. Inside divide, we're going to go and pass in a new big decimal of 52.0. We're going to pass in 2 in rounding mode half up. And then once again, we're going to go ahead and call .set scale with 2 in rounding mode half up again. Okay. That goes ahead and gets like 1 week of pay for a salary employee. Then we'll go ahead and return a payroll preview DTO.builder. Here we'll call .employee is equal to employee.get email. We'll go ahead and say .gross pay is equal to pay. We'll get payment date is equal to payroll date. And finally, we'll call .build. And finally, let's go ahead and call .toList. There we go. Now, why we didn't just call .toList for these collects, I couldn't tell you why I did one way, one the other way, but it is what it is. If you guys want to call .toList here instead of collect, that's probably also fine. I don't remember if there is an issue with this or not. I can't remember, but it is what it is. Oh, it's because toList is immutable. Okay, that's why. So it wouldn't sort properly. So it's just going to be mad at us. I don't really care. There might be a better way to do that, but it is what it is. So now we have our salary payroll preview set up. So now let's go ahead and add these to our list. So we're going to say payroll preview DTOs to add all. We're going to go ahead and pass in those salary payroll preview. Next up, let's go ahead and deal with our hourly pay stubs. Let's go ahead and say list timesheet hourly timesheets is equal to timesheet service.read timesheets for payroll. Once we have our timesheets, let's go ahead and say list payroll preview hourly payroll preview is equal to hourly timesheets.stream. Once again, we'll call .map and we'll map through the timesheets. Here, we're going to go and say employee is equal to timesheet.getEmployee. Big decimal gross pay will equal to calculate hourly gross pay. Here, we'll go ahead and pass in employee. We'll pass in timesheet.getRegular hours. We'll pass in timesheet.getOvertime hours. Once we have that set up, let's go ahead and return payroll preview DTO.builder. Here, we're going to say .employee is employee.getEmail again. Gross pay will be gross pay, and payment date will be payroll date. Finally, we'll call .build. All right, let's scroll down to add some space. And again, we'll go ahead and call .toList. Now that we have our list, let's also go ahead and call the payroll preview DTOs to add all again. And let's go ahead and pass in those hourly payroll previews. And finally, let's go ahead and return those payroll preview DTOs. So that is the logic for our preview. And if you thought that was bad, just wait, we get to make some fun stuff for the payroll as well. So that's what we're going to go ahead and work on next. Let's go ahead and come down here. And we'll go ahead and say public list of pay stub run payroll. Here we're going to go and say local date payroll date is equal to local date.now. And once again, we're going to go and say list employees is equal to employee service.read all employees. And we also need a list of pay stub called pay stubs equal to a new array list. Let's once again start out with our salary stubs. So let's go ahead and say list of pay stubs salary stubs is equal to employees.stream. Once again, let's call .filter. And we'll filter employee against employee.getPayInformation.getPayType.equals PayType.salary. Next, let's come below .filter and call .map for salaried. Inside of our map, let's go and say big decimal pay is equal to salary.getInformation.getPayAmount.divide. Inside divide, let's go and pass in a new big decimal. We'll pass in 2 in rounding mode half up. Then let's go and call .setScale with 2 in rounding mode half up. Before I forget, let's just go and clean these up a little bit. So this is getting a little bit gross. Same with this one up here. Let's also go ahead and just clean this one up a little bit as well. It got pretty gross. And there we go. Looks a lot better. So now we have the pay for the salaried employee. Now let's go ahead and return paystub.builder. And now let's try not to forget any of the properties here. First up, employee is going to be equal to salaried. Then we'll go and set the pay date to payroll date. Gross pay will be set to pay. The gross hours will be 40.0. Overtime pay will be a big decimal of 0.0. Regular pay will be pay. Overtime hours would be 0.0. Regular hours be 40.0. And finally, we'll call .build. Now that we're done with the pay stub, let's come below our map and call .toList. There we go. Looks good. Let's make ourselves some space here. Now let's go ahead and deal with our hourly stubs. So let's go ahead and say list pay stub hourly stubs is equal to timesheet service.read all sheets for payroll.stream. We're going to go ahead and call .map, and inside .map, we're going to call this : generate pay stub from timesheet. And then we'll go ahead and terminate it with .toList. Then we want to go ahead and call salary stubs is equal to pay stub repository.save all. Let's go and pass in those salary stubs that we created above. We also want to say pay stubs.add all salary stubs. And then we'll go ahead and say hourly stubs is equal to pay stub repository.save all. Go ahead and pass in those hourly stubs here. Then we'll also go ahead and say pay stubs to add all hourly stubs. And finally, we can go ahead and return those pay stubs. Go ahead and save this up, and that should go ahead and do it for our generate pay stubs. But there is still one last method I want to go ahead and set up to be used with our timesheet generate data method to go ahead and fill out employees with data for testing. Let's go ahead and come below here, and let's go ahead and declare a public list of pay stub generate pay stub data. And this method is going to go ahead and take in a list of timesheets called timesheets. Let's go ahead and open up the method. Let's go ahead and make a list of pay stub called generated pay stubs equal to a new array list. Then let's go ahead and call it timesheets.forEach timesheet. Inside our for each, let's go ahead and say pay stub is equal to generate pay stub from timesheet. Let's go ahead and pass in that timesheet. And then we'll also go ahead and call generated pay stubs.add pay stub. And then finally, we'll come outside here. We'll go ahead and say return pay stub repository.save all. And inside, let's go ahead and pass in those generated pay stubs. Let's go ahead and save that. And that should go ahead and do it for the primary pay logic. Now we can go ahead and move along to setting up the controller to be able to actually access the logic through our API. As mentioned at the end of the last section, we are now ready to expose our logic to the world via API. So that means we need to go ahead and create our payroll controller. So let's go and open up our project explorer here, go up to our controllers, make a new class. We'll go ahead and call this And I call this payroll controller. I called the other ones pay stub, but it is what it is. We'll just go ahead and call this payroll controller. Y'all get the idea here. Let's go ahead and close out of our project explorer and come above. First off, let's go ahead and annotate this with @REST controller. Let's go and import our REST controller. Let's also go ahead and annotate it with @request mapping. Import that, and then inside of @request mapping, we're gonna go ahead and set this to /payroll. We also need to go ahead and bring in some dependencies. So let's go ahead and say @required args constructor as well. Let's go ahead and import that, and that looks good to go. Let's open up our payroll controller here. First thing we want to go ahead and do is say private final paystub service, paystub service. Let's go ahead and import our paystub service here. And now we can go ahead and get to work on our API logic. So first off, we need to go ahead and set up a route for getting an employee's paystub. So let's say public list of paystub, get employees paystubs. Let's go ahead and import our paystub here. There we go, and inside of the method parameter, we're going to go ahead and include an @path variable. Import that. This is going to be called email. We're going to go ahead and store this in a string email. We're also going to go ahead and include an @request param. Let's go and import that. And inside here, we're going to go ahead and say year. We're going to go ahead and store this inside of an optional string called year. Let's go and import our optional. And now let's go and annotate this class. We also need to, import our list here. Now we can annotate our class. First, let's go ahead and say @getMapping. And then we're going to go ahead and map this request to /view/email. And now let's go ahead and open up the method to actually get to work here. First, we're going to go ahead and check if year is present. If year is present, we're going to return paystubservice.read paystubs for employee of year. And here we're going to pass in email and gear.get. There we go. Otherwise, here we're just going to go ahead and return paystubservice.read paystubs for employee. And here, just go ahead and pass in their email. So here, this basically allows us to either just pass in a year and get only for that year, or we can just go ahead and get all of them from all time. So let's come below here and start working on our next endpoints. Next, we'll go ahead and say public list, payroll preview DTO, preview payroll. This one's not going to take anything in. We just need to go ahead and import that class. So let's come above and say @getMapping again. And here, we're going to go map this to /preview. Then let's go ahead and open this up. Inside, let's go and just return paystubservice.preview payroll. Let's also go ahead and set up a request for just running the payroll. So let's go ahead and say public list of paystub, run payroll. Once again, it's not going to take anything. So let's come above and put on an @getMapping. We're going to go ahead and map this one to /run. And now we're ready to go and open up our method. Here, we're just going to go ahead and return paystubservice.run payroll. And finally, let's go ahead and declare one more to generate some test data. So let's go ahead and say public list paystub, generate test data. Inside this one, let's go ahead and say @request_body. Let's go and import our request body. And here, this is going to take in a list of timesheets. We'll call sheets. We need to go ahead and import our list probably and our timesheet, but just our timesheet, okay. And then above, let's go ahead and add an @post mapping. Import that, and we're going to go ahead and map this to /data. And now we can come inside of the method. Here we're going to return paystubservice.generate paystub data. There we go. And then inside here, let's go ahead and pass in the sheets. There we go. That looks good. That'll go ahead and wrap up all the logic for our payments. Now we just have a couple more changes to help us retrieve the employees by a specific manager. That way they can manage their reports and review their timesheets. So as mentioned at the end of the last section, we just have a little bit more work to get the manager logic all wrapped up before we can go ahead and start testing this. So the first thing that we need to go ahead and do is we need to go into the employee repository and set up the ability to grab specific employees by the manager. So let's go ahead and hop into the employee repository right now. Inside our employee repository, we need to go ahead and set up a new method. So let's come inside here and let's go ahead and say list employees is equal to find by reports to. And we need to go ahead and import our list. And here we're going to go ahead and pass in employee reports to. And that looks good. Now we can go ahead and actually pass in the specific manager and then go ahead and get all the employees that they actually manage. So that looks good. Now we just need to go ahead and set up a quick functionality inside of our employee service to be able to use this. So let's go ahead and hop into our employee service. So inside our employee service, let's just come below like the read employee by email, I suppose. And let's go ahead and set up a new method called a public list employee read all reports by email. And then here we're going to go ahead and pass in string manager email. Let's go and open this up. And here we're going to say employee manager is equal to get employee by email or throw exception. And then we'll go ahead and pass in that manager email. Then below here, let's go ahead and say return employee repository.find by reports to. And then we'll go ahead and simply pass in that manager. Let's go ahead and save that. That looks good. And now that we have the employee service changes taken care of, we can just go ahead and quickly hop into the employee controller and set up a quick new endpoint to return the list of those reports to the front end. So let's go ahead and hop into our employee controller as well. And then again, we'll just go ahead and just come below our get employees by email. It doesn't really matter where this goes because it's all going to work the same anyway. I just kind of like to lump things together. So to go ahead and get the manager's reports, let's go ahead and say public list employee, get manager's reports. Inside here, let's go ahead and pass in an at path variable. Inside the path variable, we'll go ahead and pass in the email of the manager. And we'll go ahead and store this inside of a string email. Let's come above. We're going to go ahead and add in an at get mapping. We're going to map this to /reports to /curly braces email. And then inside of the method itself, we're simply going to return employee service.read all reports by email. Then let's go ahead and pass in that email. Let's go ahead and save this up here. And that should go ahead and do it for all of the manage logic for the employee service and controller. Finally, we just need to go ahead and set up a couple more things for the timesheets, and then we're good to go. So let's go ahead and do that in the next section. As mentioned at the end of the last section, the last functionality of the manager is to review timesheets, and we have set up the timesheet service logic to do that, but we still need to go ahead and handle the controller method to actually send and handle the request. But before we set up the controller method, we first need an object to send the request data to our backend. So let's go ahead and create a record to do that. So let's go ahead and open up our Project Explorer here, go into our DTO, make a new Java class. This one is going to be a record. We're going to go ahead and call this review timesheet, and this is going to be called request. Go and open this up and close out our Project Explorer here. Instead of our review timesheet request, we're going to have an employee approver. Let's go and import our employee here. We're going to go ahead and have an integer timesheet ID. We'll go ahead and have our timesheet status. Let's go ahead and import our timesheet status here. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and have a string message. There we go. We're going to come above here, and just for good measure, we're going to go ahead and add the app builder annotation. Let's go and import that, and that should go ahead and do it. We're also going to go ahead and need a new DTO to be able to generate some test data. So let's also go ahead and open up our Project Explorer, make a new Java class. We'll go ahead and make this a record as well, and this is going to be called generate and timesheet data request. Make sure we call data correctly, data request. There we go. And let's go inside of this record. We're going to have employee. Let's go and import our employee once again. And we're also going to go ahead and have employee manager. And then once again, for good measure, we'll also go ahead and include app builder. Let's go and import our app builder, and that looks good to go. So that should be our DTOs that we need. Let's go ahead and close out some stuff that we don't need here. And now we're ready to go and open up our project and open up our timesheet controller and set up the logic for our manager. So inside of our timesheet controller, we just have a few more methods / routes we need to go ahead and set up for our manager to hit. First off, let's start by creating a new public method that will go ahead and be for getting the timesheets to review. So let's say public list timesheet, get timesheets to review for manager. Let's go ahead and import our list here. There we go. Inside of our method parameter here, we're going to have an at request body. Go and import that, and the request body is going to be a list of employees. We'll call employees. Then above, let's go ahead and say at post mapping. Inside the post map, we'll go ahead and map this to /manager. And then let's go and open up our method here. And inside the method, it will simply return timesheet service.read manager's timesheets to approve. And then we'll go ahead and pass in those employees. There we go. Next up, we want to go ahead and set up the ability to review the timesheet. So I'm just going to come below the submit, and then let's go ahead and say public timesheet review timesheet. Inside, let's go ahead and pass in at request body. The request body will be a review timesheet request. We'll call body. Let's go and import the review timesheet request here. Come above, we're going to go ahead and add at put mapping. And then inside at put mapping, we're going to say /review. And now we go ahead and open up our method again. And inside here, we're going to return timesheet service.approve or deny timesheets. And inside, we need to go ahead and pass body.timesheet ID. We need to pass body.status, body.approver, and finally body.message. That looks good to go for reviewing a timesheet. Finally, we need to go ahead and set up the request for setting up our data. So here, let's go ahead and say public list timesheet, generate timesheet data. Inside, let's go and pass in at request body. The request body will be a generate timesheet data request. We'll call body. Let's go and import this guy here and come above. Once again, we'll go ahead and say at post mapping. We're going to map this to /data. And then inside of the method body itself, we're going to go ahead and return timesheet service.generate timesheet for payroll tests. And inside, let's go and pass in body.employee and body.manager. Go ahead and save that up. And that should go ahead and do it for the additional logic for payments in the manager role. So now we just need to go ahead and configure our new routes inside of our Spring Security config and get all of that set up so we can go ahead and test in Postman. The last step to setting up our backend for this chapter is to go ahead and set up our Spring Security configuration. So let's go and open up our Spring Security configuration class and start working. So the first thing we need to go ahead and do is add in some new admin routes. So I'm going to come in below the /employee put here. And the first thing we want to go ahead and do is only admins can preview the payroll. So let's go ahead and say new ant path request matcher to /payroll/preview. Next up, we only want admins to be able to run the payroll. So we'll make a new ant path request matcher to /payroll/run. Only admin can go ahead and generate data. So we'll go ahead and say new ant path request matcher for /timesheet/data, as well as a new ant path request matcher for /payroll/data. That should go ahead and do it for our admin stuff. Now we need to go ahead and set up specific routes only for our managers. So to do that, once again, we're going to go ahead and set up a private static ant path request matcher array, manager routes. And inside, let's go ahead and return a new ant path request matcher array. Let's go ahead and open up the array here. And first, we're going to go ahead and pass in a new ant path request matcher to /employee/reports to/email. Then we want the managers to be able to view timesheets. So let's go ahead and say new ant path request matcher to /timesheet/manager. And finally, managers are able to review timesheets. So let's go ahead and add in a new ant path request matcher to /timesheet/review. There we go. That looks good for our manager routes. Now let's go ahead and set up the request matchers inside of our security filter chain here. So let's just come below admin and we're going to go ahead and say .request matchers. Inside, let's go ahead and call the manager routes method. And then now we can go ahead and call .has role of manager. That looks good. We can go ahead and save that. That should go ahead and wrap up the last of our payroll and manager logic. Now we just need to go ahead and restart our application, hop into Postman, and then make sure the logic works. And also make sure that request matchers are working properly. So let's go ahead and restart our application. Looks like everything is good. Let's go ahead and close out of this. And now let's go ahead and hop into Postman and test out our new manager endpoints. And then later on, we'll go ahead and test out the data endpoints. We're not worried about that right now. We'll go ahead and worry about that at the end whenever we're testing everything out and we're trying to view all the data on the front end. So here in Postman, we have our chapter 5 folder here, and enabled to test the manager endpoints, we actually need to go ahead and log in as other employees first. And this is because, of course, we need timesheets to actually approve. So let's go ahead and log in with auth login employee. We'll go ahead and just log in as employee 1. So you can see employee 1 and so on. So let's go ahead and log in. That should go ahead and create our JSession token. And once we do that, let's go ahead and generate a new timesheet. So let's go ahead and close out of auth here. Go into our timesheet, generate or get timesheet, and this should be good. Employee 1, that looks fine. Let's go ahead and generate that timesheet. There we go. Let's go ahead and also fill this out. So let's go ahead and update the hours here. I'm going to copy this because it's a new week that I'm recording this section. So I'm going to go ahead and actually copy the wrong thing. Let's copy the timesheet. There we go. Let's copy this timesheet. Let's go into our update hours here, and let's go ahead and paste this in like so. Okay, and paste this in. There we go. And then let's go ahead and update the hours. So Saturday we didn't work. Let's say that we went ahead and worked on this day. So let's go ahead and say 8. And on Thursday we'll say 8. Wednesday we'll say 8. Tuesday we'll say 8. And then Monday we'll say 8. And actually, let's go ahead and put 4 hours on Saturday. And that way we can kind of deny it first and then reapprove it. But there we go. Let's go ahead and do that. Cool. So now we have a timesheet. Let's also go ahead and submit that timesheet for review. So it should just be 1. That should be fine. There we go. Looks good. And now it is submitted. And we have 44 hours, no messages or anything on that. That's fine. We can go ahead and save this for now. That's fine as well. So that should be everything we need to go ahead and get this all set up for approval/denial. So now that we have our timesheets filled out, let's go ahead and log in as the manager. So go back into login. This one has the manager details. Once again, this is to /auth login. At this point, if y'all have followed along, you should know the endpoint for logging in. So that's kind of why I'm breezing over this as well as over the ones that we've already seen. Let's go ahead and try to log in as a manager. There we go. Looks good. So the first thing that we can go ahead and test out is to make sure we can fetch all the manager reports. So to do this, let's go ahead and make a GET request in our employees. And it's going to be read all reports. So this is going to be to http://localhost 8000/employee/reports to, and then that manager's email. And if I forgot to mention, this is a GET request. And whenever we make this request, we should see a list of all the employees the manager reports to. Right now, there's only one employee because we restarted the application, but you can see that we have employee 1 here. That looks good. Next, let's go ahead and get all the timesheets that the manager needs to approve or deny. So to do this, we're going to go ahead and let's hop into our manager timesheets here. So this is going to be a post request to timesheet to http://localhost 8000/timesheet/manager. And inside of our request body, we're going to go ahead and have all of our users. So right now, obviously, the manager only has one person they're managing. If there's two, there'll be more. And what we can do here for this is you can just take the read all reports request or response here and go ahead and paste it in here. And now we can go ahead and send this. We should be able to get back all the timesheets that we need to review. So you can see we have timesheet 1. And if we had more employees, there'd be other ones as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first timesheet here and see what hours look like. So we can go ahead and see that they have, if we come down here, they have 40 hours and 4 hours of overtime. Let's just say that for whatever reason, we're not allowing overtime this week or something. So if we go to our review timesheet here, we want to go ahead and say the denied. We can go ahead and make a put request to http://localhost 8000/timesheet/review. And here, this is going to go ahead and take in a timesheet ID. So we can just say timesheet 1. We'll have the approver, which is us, which is ID 2. Here on the front end, we'll actually pass back the entire user or employee here. For me, I'm just being a little bit lazy. All Spring Data needs to actually find the approver through the database is the ID. So we pass that there. Status here is going to be denied. And then we're going to go ahead and say, hey, overtime is not allowed. Now, if we go ahead and send this off, it should go ahead and pass us back in timesheet. And then here, if we scroll down, or I might have missed it, it might be up here. Yeah, so status is denied. And it also has a message on it, or it should have. I'm not 100% sure why the message didn't get set. We might need to debug that. We might have an issue, or I might have called this something other than denial message. Let's just double check that really quick. So this should be the review timesheet request, I think. So yes, I just called this message. So let's go ahead and copy this. And let's make sure that we actually spell this right. So this should just be message, I believe. Let's save that and let's try to deny it again. See if the message comes back. There we go. Got to make sure that matches up with our DTO. No big deal there. So now what we're going to have to go ahead and do is log back in to our employee and actually take off that overtime. So this is why it's a little bit annoying to test in Postman, but it is what it is. Let's go ahead and log in as the employee. Once again, you guys should know this route by now. We've been through 5 chapters. There we go. Let's go ahead and get our timesheet here. Copy this. We have our timesheet. Let's go and copy it, and we'll go ahead and update the hours. So you can see we have our message there, and that's all good. Copy it again, and then we'll go ahead and go into our update hours. Go ahead and let's go ahead and paste this in. I'm sorry. Paste that in like so, and now we'll go ahead and say, hey, we did 0 hours on Saturday. Let's go and update those hours. You can see that it should. I guess it doesn't reset the message yet. It'll reset the message after we submit for review. But now we can go ahead and submit this for review. It's still timesheet 1. Submit it. Hopefully the message is reset. I guess not. I thought it would, but maybe I'm mistaken. But it is what it is, or maybe I do have a little bit of an issue logic. If I do, I'll come back and fix that up and let you guys know what happened there. So the final thing that we can go ahead and do is log back into our manager. So let's log into manager. Then let's go ahead and go into our review timesheet approve. So here we have, once again, to http://localhost 8000/timesheet/review. Once again, it's going to be very similar. However, timesheet ID 1, approver ID is 2 once again, and then status is approved. Here we don't have a message because we're just going to go ahead and be approving it. So we're going to get rid of that message. Let's go ahead and send. And now we should be able to see that we have no message, which is perfectly fine. I don't know why it's saying overtime hours is still 4. Maybe we also missed a little bit of logic there too. I might need to debug that, but we should be able to see here that our status is approved. I might go back and just take a double look at what's going on there and just do a couple of tests here off camera to make sure that you guys are up to date and make sure that we fix any little bugs here. This is something I didn't notice before, but we'll see if it's an issue on the front end. If not, we're just going to ignore it and maybe it's fine. But anyway, y'all, the last thing that we can go ahead and do is log into the admin and just take a look at our payroll preview and then also run a payroll and then make sure that data gets set up. So let's go ahead and log into the admin here. So let's go ahead and log in, make sure that everything is good. There we go. Cool. And then now we should be able to go to our pay and go into preview payroll. So here, there's going to be a GET request to http://localhost 8000/payroll/preview. Let's go and send this and see what happens. So it's kind of hard to tell whether or not this set up correctly. I think the gross pay is a little bit high here. So I think for some reason our overtime is not getting set properly. So I have to go through and figure out what's going on and why that isn't getting set. That would have been from last episode, I believe. So I'll go back through and make sure that's working. But that is our preview. And then if this all looks good, we can also go ahead and run it. So if we go ahead and go to run payroll, this is going to be to http://localhost 8000/payroll/run. We go ahead and send this guy. You should see that we get a bunch of pay stubs. So here our pay date, our gross hours is 40, regular hours 40, so on and so forth. So these are just going to be 40 hours. And then for our employee 3, let's see. Yeah, so overtime hours are still set here. I need to go ahead and see what's going on whenever we submit and update our hours. Maybe the update didn't go through. I'm not sure what's going on there, but I'll do some small testing in between sections here and update you guys with what I find. That way we can stay transparent and make sure we're all up to date. And I guess I did go ahead and have it slated for viewing and setting up some payroll data. So finally, we should be able to, as an admin, have the ability to generate timesheets from today's date to the beginning of the year. So to do that, we can go ahead and go to generate data. First, we need the timesheets, I guess. So first we go ahead and go to our timesheet and generate data. This is a post request to http://localhost/timesheet/data. Here we need the employee. We need their ID. We also need their pay information. That way it knows how much to pay them. We also have our manager. So if we go ahead and run this, we should generate a whole bunch of pay stubs. Let's go ahead and copy this object. Make sure we copy the entire thing here. There we go. Let's copy this whole object. Getting bigger and bigger the longer and longer it takes me to record this, but it is what it is. And finally, we can go ahead and generate some data for pay stubs. So let's go ahead and go to our pay here. And here, this is going to be to http://localhost/payroll/data. This is a post request, and this is going to go ahead and take in this big list of pay stubs here, or not pay stubs, I'm sorry, timesheets. We can go ahead and send this. And we should get a whole bunch of pay stubs. So that looks good. And then finally, what we can go ahead and do is just make sure that we are getting all of that. So let's go ahead and go into our pay once again, and we should be able to read our pay stubs. Let's just go ahead and do 2025 because we don't have any other years. So this is a GET request to http://localhost 8000/payroll/view. And then we have our employee at company.com. So that is the email. And then the year is 2025. So in theory, fingers crossed, this should be able to send back all of the payroll data from the last year. Let's go and send this. Also, let's make sure we log in as an employee before we do this. That way we actually get the correct data. Okay, we should be logged in as an employee. Now let's go ahead and run this. Fingers crossed. Looks good. There we go. So now we have all of our pay stubs. I'm not going to look through each and every one of these. They're basically random. But that is that. So that should go ahead and be all of our new endpoints tested and ready to go. I do need to go back and just look at what's going on with our update hours. It should be clearing the message and also clearing the overtime. And maybe I didn't actually click send or something. I thought that I had. Let's see here. Send. You know what? No, there's no issue. I just forgot to. I think whenever we actually update the hours, it just resets the message. We have to reset it. We also have to, I guess I didn't set this properly because you can see whenever I updated hours, it still says 4.0. So there's not actually a problem there, I don't think. I think that I just messed up and forgot to change this because I'm pretty sure in the front end we'll reset this. So I'm going to go ahead and chalk that up as non-issue for now. In the front end, if we see an issue, we'll go ahead and definitely come back and I'll update it before the end of the episode. But I guess I just forgot to actually update this. I set the hours to 0 inside of here. but maybe it should have said it. I don't know. I'll double check the logic. Now I'm double guessing myself. But anyway, y'all, I think we're ready to go ahead and hop into the front end and start taking a look at setting up our manage reports page, as well as being able to allow managers to actually review the reports timesheets. Really quickly here, before we get into working on the front end, I want to just give a quick update on the situation with the update timesheet hours. I went back through and retried it. I basically restarted the application, recreated a timesheet with overtime hours, submitted it, and then submitted a new one without overtime hours, and it worked. I must have just not submitted it whenever we were testing in the last section. So just keep that in mind. There shouldn't be anything to change. If anything else pops up, I'll go ahead and update you guys with ways to fix it. But for now, I don't have any reason to think that it wasn't working. I think that I just forgot to click submit there, like a kind of dumb head or something. I don't know. But with that being said, let's go ahead and hop into the front end here and get the manager logic all set up here on the front end. Now that we know our backend is working properly, let's set up the front end application to allow the manager to manage your employees. To do this, first we want to create a skeleton page for the manage reports. So let's go ahead and open up our source, go into our pages, make a new file. We'll go ahead and call this manage and then reports and page.tsx. This one is not going to have a CSS, so we're just going to go ahead and close out of this. What we want to go ahead and do is just say export default function manage reports page. Inside, let's just go ahead and declare our quick return statement. And inside the return, let's go ahead and return a div with the class name of page container. Now that our compiler is happy, let's go ahead and come above our return statement, and we need to go ahead and bring in some state here. So first we just want to go ahead and grab some stuff from the global context. So let's go ahead and say const employee, employees, and employee service is equal to use global context as global context type. Go ahead and import our global context here. And let's also go ahead and import our global context type. It still may be angry at us for a little bit because we're not using some of these, but that's fine. Now we're ready to go ahead and hop back into the page container div here. First, let's go ahead and check to see if our employee is logged in, and go ahead and have question mark and then do an empty fragment or empty fragment. Now let's go ahead and just clean this up to make it look a little bit prettier here. So go ahead and put these on their own lines. And then instead of having empty fragments, if the employee is logged in, let's go ahead and have a div. Okay, I don't know why I didn't close it, but there we go. Inside the div, we'll go ahead and have an employees card. Let's go ahead and import our employees card here from our components. Then let's go ahead and set up the props. First, we're going to have a header equal to your reports. The employees will equal to employees. And finally, we'll set display edit employee to false. That looks good. We don't have an error employee card now. And finally, if our employee is not logged in or it's loading the employee information, let's go ahead and get rid of this fragment. And let's go ahead and display the loading component. There we go. Let's go and import our loading component. And that is our basic manage page. Is it's going to go ahead and display all of the reports for the manager. Now, obviously, right now we're just displaying some employees, but we're going to have to actually fetch said employees for the manager. So we'll deal with that in a little bit. But first, we need to go ahead and actually bring this in to the app.tsx to be able to actually view the page. So let's go ahead and hop into the app.tsx really quick. So here we go, app.tsx. And now where we have the manager reports manage page here, let's go ahead and get rid of this. And let's actually go ahead and render that manage reports page. Let's go ahead and bring in this manage reports page like so, and go ahead and save this. Now we can go ahead and hop into the front end here and just make sure that we'll actually see this. Now obviously right now we won't be able to see any of the reports showing up because we're not fetching them, but we can at least see the page. So let's go ahead and hop into the browser here and just give it a quick look. Let's go ahead and just give it a refresh for giggles. And then let's go ahead and we don't want employee, we want manager, employee at company.com. And then let's go ahead and say PASS. Go and log in. And there we go. So now you can see we have your reports and then we have the table. Now, obviously, whenever we go through and fetch this, we'll be able to put this in. And then it doesn't have as much information. You won't be able to basically view as much information as the admin, just because you have less privileges than the admin, obviously. But you can at least see all of your reports. So with that being said, now we can go ahead and hop back into the front end and start setting up the employee service to be able to actually fetch those employees for the manager and set them in our global state. That way we can display them here inside this table. Back inside our application code here, let's go ahead and open up our Explorer and let's hop into our services and then our employee service. We need to go ahead and set up a new function inside of employee service to go ahead and fetch the manager's reports. To do that, let's go ahead and go into the employee service type. Let's go ahead and declare the fetch manager reports, which is an arrow function that returns void. Inside the arrow function parameters, let's go ahead and pass in email of type string. That looks good. And since we're just going to go ahead and be setting them inside of the employees, we can just go ahead and reuse the update employees, and we're ready to go ahead and create the function down here. Let's go ahead and scroll down here to below our submit update contact information. And let's go ahead and just say const fetch manager reports is equal to an async error function. Inside of our function parameters, let's go and pass email string. Then we'll go and open up the function here, and let's go ahead and set up a try catch. Inside the catch, let's first go ahead and say console.log e, so it's not mad about us not using e. And then we'll go ahead and come into the try. Inside the try, let's go ahead and say const res is equal to await request.get. Inside the get, we'll say /employee/reports to $curly brace email. Then below, we'll go ahead and say update employees with res.data if we successfully got the request back. And that'll actually go ahead and do it for our manage reports. It's pretty simple here. We're not really dealing with any loading state or anything like that. I just didn't feel like it was necessary for this. If you guys do want to add a loading and error state, you can. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and do this. So now the final thing we need to go ahead and do is just throw this into our return statement. So let's go ahead and come down here below our submit contact information and go ahead and put in our fetch manager reports. And there we go. Now it's not mad anymore. Now that we have the ability to fetch reports, let's go ahead and update the manage reports page to actually do that and display the employees at the manager reports. So let's hop back into our manage reports page. To do this, we're going to go ahead and set up a use effect. So let's come below our use global context call here and say use effect. Let's go ahead and import our use effect here, and also make it just a little bit prettier here and bring this down as well as this. There we go. Inside the dependency array, let's go ahead and pass and watch for the employee to change. Again, this is just in case it goes from undefined to being defined. And then inside the use effect, let's go ahead and check for if employee. Inside of the if statement, let's go ahead and call employee service.fetch managers reports. And then inside of the function call, let's go ahead and pass in employee.email. And we can go ahead and save that. And now whenever the manage reports page loads up, it'll go ahead and call that use effect, which should fetch those managers reports and then put them inside of our table here inside the employees card. So let's just go ahead and make sure that's saved. Let's just go ahead and check out the front end to make sure everything is working properly. And we'll move on to getting the review timesheets all set up. So back inside here, we need to log in. Let's go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and say manager and employee at company.com and go ahead and put in PASS for password. And then you can see we have our employee 1. And if we go ahead and actually open up Postman, let's log in as the admin really quick. I don't feel like logging out and logging in again on the front end. And let's go ahead and just generate a new employee. So if we go into, I believe it's inside of auth register, there we go. Body, we should have an employee second here. That's fine. Let's go ahead and run this. And now let's go ahead and refresh. We'll have to log out and log in because we don't have a way to refresh currently. But now if we go ahead and say manager employee and at company.com and then PASS again for password. And you can see we have employee 1, employee 2. Looks good. So everything's looking good now. Now we should be able to go ahead and hop back into the front end and start working on the ability for the employees to go ahead and review timesheets. Back inside of VS Code here, now that we can see all the employees that report to a specific manager, we need to set up a way to allow the manager to view the timesheets that need to be reviewed. To do this, we'll go ahead and create another page to route to and render. Let's go ahead and open up our Project Explorer here. Inside of our pages, we'll make a new file. We'll go ahead and call this review and timesheet page, page.tsx. Again, we're not going to have any CSS for this one. Inside here, let's go ahead and say export default function, review timesheets page. And I made a quick typo here, so let's go ahead and fix this before this gets too bad. So let's go ahead and just do this a rename here and make sure this says timesheets. I know it's a little bit small over there, but make sure it says review timesheets page to match our function that we don't have any issues. Let's go and open up this function, and inside let's set up our return statement. Inside the return statement, let's go ahead and render a div with a class name of page container. And now that our compiler is happy, let's go ahead and hop above, and we need to go ahead and set up a quick piece of state. So let's go ahead and say const employee is equal to use global context as global context type. Let's go ahead and import our use global context here, and also go ahead and import our global context type. I'm not sure why we have a random space there, but now we're good to go and hop back in here. Once again, we need to make sure that the employee is logged in and their state has been updated in the global context. Let's go ahead and check for employee, have a question mark, and render a fragment or a fragment for now. Let's go ahead and clean this up a little bit. So we'll go ahead and bring the fragment down here. Let's go ahead and bring the colon down here and the fragment down. So now if the employee is logged in, we want to go ahead and actually render a div with a class name of column. Let's go ahead and close this div since VS Code doesn't want to do its job. Okay, and then inside of this div, we'll go ahead and have an information card. Let's go ahead and import our information card here. There we go. And then inside the information card, we're first going to have an H3 that says timesheets ready for review. Below our H3, we're going to have a fragment with review timesheets card, which is going to act as a placeholder for the review timesheets card component we'll create soon. And then if the employee is still loading in, we're still getting their information, we're going to go ahead and render the loading component as well. Let's go ahead and import our loading component really quick. Looks good. So that's going to do it for our quick page here. So now all we need to go ahead and do is add this skeleton page into our routing inside of our app.tsx. Let's hop into our app.tsx. And again, let's go ahead and get rid of this. And we've actually got basically all the pages filled out after this. We just need to go back through in the next episode and set up some more advanced authentication and things like that. Let's go ahead and replace that fragment placeholder with the actual review timesheets page component. Let's go and import our review timesheets page here. And then quickly, let's just hop into the front end and make sure we can navigate there and make sure everything looks fine. So back in here, you can already see that we're on the manage timesheets page. We can say timesheets ready for review and the review timesheets card, and everything looks good. So now that we have everything all set up here, we still need to go ahead and go through and obviously set up this review timesheet card. And a little bit later on in the episode, we'll also deal with setting up the ability to preview and run payroll. So with that being said, let's go and hop back into the VS Code here and get to work on setting up our timesheets in the global context. Moving forward here, the next thing we need to go ahead and work on is the ability for the manager to go ahead and view the timesheets and review them. So to do that, we need to go ahead and open up our Explorer here and hop into our global context, where we need to go ahead and set up some new pieces of the global state for the employee to actually see. So right now we already have timesheet, but we actually need to go ahead and store multiple timesheets for the manager to approve. Let's go ahead and come below timesheet. Let's go ahead and set up a new property inside of our global context type called timesheets, which is a timesheet array. Now that we have the timesheets done, we also need to go ahead and update our global context reducers. Let's come below our update timesheets. What we want to go ahead and do is declare an update timesheets, which is an arrow function and returns void. Inside the function parameters, let's go ahead and pass in timesheets, which is a timesheet array. Go and save that up, looks good. And now at this point, our global context provider is mad at us because we don't have all of the state that we need. So first, let's go ahead and come in below our const timesheet. Let's go ahead and declare const timesheets and set timesheets is equal to use state of a timesheet array. And that'll go ahead and start out as an empty array. Then let's come below our update timesheet reducer here. Let's go ahead and say const update timesheets is equal to an arrow function. Let's go ahead and inside of our parameters here and go ahead and pass timesheets, which is a timesheet array. And we'll go ahead and open up our function and say set timesheets with those timesheets. Now we go ahead and inside of our reducers here, let's go ahead and add in those update timesheets. And finally, let's go ahead and update our global context provider to also include that state. So come below our timesheet and include timesheets. That looks good, everything seems happy, and now that we have the state to actually store the timesheets, which we need to be reviewed, we can go ahead and set up the ability to actually fetch those timesheets. So let's go ahead and navigate over to the pay service to set this up. So let's come into the pay service here, and first thing we need to go ahead and do is update some pieces inside of our pay service type here. Let's go ahead and come below our submit timesheet for approval, and let's go ahead and declare a fetch timesheets by manager, which is an arrow function and returns void. Inside of the parameter, let's go ahead and pass in an employees, which is an employee array. And that's all we need to go ahead and do inside of here. Next, we need to go ahead and import the reducer or break apart the reducer to update the timesheet. So let's go ahead and come to where our update timesheet here is equal to reducers. Let's go ahead and include update timesheets. That looks good. Let's go ahead and save it. It's mad at us for now because we're not using it, but that's fine. And now we can go ahead and scroll down here below where our submit timesheet for approval is. And let's go ahead and declare const fetch timesheets by manager is equal to an async arrow function. Inside of our function parameters, let's go ahead and pass employees, which is an employee array. Let's go and open up our function. Let's start out with a try catch statement. Once again, inside the catch, let's just go ahead and console.log e to make the compiler happy. And then we'll also go ahead and set timesheet errors to true. Then let's come inside the try. Inside the try, let's go ahead and say set loading timesheet data to true. And we'll also go ahead and set the timesheet error to false. And now let's go ahead and set up our request. So let's go ahead and say const res is equal to await request.post. Inside of our post, let's go ahead and make the request to /timesheet/manager. And then we want to go ahead and pass in those employees as the body. And then if this was successful, let's go ahead and say update timesheets with res.data. Then whether we succeed or fail, let's go ahead and set up a finally block. And inside the finally, let's go ahead and say set loading timesheet data to false. Looks good. Now it's just mad at us because we're not using this fetch timesheet manager anywhere. So now all we need to go ahead and do is come below here inside of our return, and let's go ahead and include the fetch timesheets by manager. And that should be all we need to go ahead and do to go ahead and fetch those timesheets. So now while we're at work inside the pay service, let's also go ahead and set up the ability to approve and deny timesheet. But before we do that, we actually need a new payload object to pass to the backend. Let's go ahead and hop into our types file here. So let's go ahead and say types.ts. And now that we're in here, let's go ahead and set up a new interface to send to the backend. So inside the types.ts, let's go ahead and hop below our edit employee payload here. And let's go ahead and say export interface review timesheet payload. And inside here, we're going to go ahead and have an improver of type employee. We'll go ahead and have a timesheet ID, which is a number. We'll have a status, which is a timesheet status. And finally, we'll have a message, which is a string or null. That looks good. Let's go ahead and save this. And now that we have this set up, let's go ahead and hop back into the pay service and finish setting up the logic for our manager employees. Once again, let's come to the top of our pay service. When you come into our pay service type here, let's go ahead and set up a new property here called review timesheet, which is an arrow function returns void. Inside of our function parameter here, let's go ahead and pass in a payload, a review timesheet payload. And we'll also go ahead and pass in a timesheet, which is a timesheet array. Let's go ahead and import our review timesheet payload here from our types. Looks good. And now let's go ahead and scroll back down here. We don't need to set up any more state. We just need to come below our fetch timesheets by manager and go ahead and declare our const review timesheet is equal to an async arrow function. Inside of our function parameters, let's go ahead and pass our payload, which is a review timesheet payload, as well as timesheets, which is a timesheet array. Let's open up our function here and start out with the try catch block. Inside the catch, let's go ahead and say console.log e to make the linter happy. And then we'll go ahead and say set timesheet error to true. That looks good. Let's come inside of our try. Inside the try, let's say set loading timesheet data to true. Then we'll also go ahead and say set timesheet error to false. And now we're ready to go ahead and make the request. So let's go ahead and say await request.put. Inside the request, let's go ahead and make the request to /timesheet/review. We'll go ahead and pass in the payload as well. If we get the request back successfully, basically all we want to go ahead and do is, since we approved it and denied it already, we'll go ahead and take that timesheet out of the list that was being displayed. Let's go ahead and say const filtered timesheets is equal to timesheets.filter. And here we'll go ahead and say timesheet error function, and then timesheet.id is not equal to payload.timesheetid. This will go ahead and just return all the timesheets except for the one that was inside of our payload. And then finally, let's go ahead and call update timesheets with those filtered timesheets. Looks good. Now let's go ahead and set up a finally block for no matter what happens. And inside the finally, let's just go ahead and call set loading timesheet data to false. Now all we have left to do is go ahead and include this inside of our return again. So let's come below our fetch timesheets by manager. We'll go ahead and pass in that review timesheet. So that looks good to go for also reviewing timesheets. Now we should be all set up to go ahead and load in those data and actually go ahead and review them and approve or deny them. So that being said, let's go ahead and start setting up the ability to do that. Now that we have the means of loading in the timesheets that need reviewed and the ability to actually review them, we can now work on the table that displays these timesheets. To do this, let's go ahead and close out of a couple things here that we no longer need. Let's go and open up our Explorer here and go into our components. Go ahead and make a new directory, and we're going to go ahead and call this review and timesheets table, like so. This one won't have a CSS for now, so let's go ahead and make a new file. Let's go ahead and say review and timesheets table.tsx. Go ahead and close out of our Explorer. The first thing that we're going to go ahead and need is a interface for our props. Let's go ahead and say interface review timesheet table props. And again, I kind of spelled things wonky here, but bear with me. I don't know why I name things the way I do, but let's just make sure that I am, consistent here with my notes. So let's go ahead and rename this to timesheet table, and also go ahead and rename this one to timesheet table as well. That way I'm consistent with what's in the GitHub. So now let's go ahead and say this takes in a timesheets, which is a timesheet array. Let's go and import our timesheet here. There we go. And then let's come below here and say export const review timesheet table, which is a react.fc arrow function. Let's go and set up our props by coming behind the react.fc and including our angled brackets with review timesheet table props. And then let's go ahead and come in here and destructure those. So let's go ahead and say timesheets inside of the curly braces. There we go. Let's go and open up the function and just set up a quick return statement. Inside a return statement, let's go ahead and render a table component. And let's go ahead and import our table. And this is going to go ahead and need children props. So let's go ahead and pass in a T body before we start setting up our state and logic. There we go. Now the table is happy. Let's come above and start setting up our state and logic. We're going to need a little bit of state from a global context. So let's go ahead and say const employee in pay service is equal to use global context as global context type. Let's go and import our global context here, as well as our global context type. There we go. Looks good. And then we need to go ahead and start setting up the headers and other things for our table. So to do that, let's go ahead and say const review timesheet header is equal to an array. And then inside of array, we need to go ahead and start setting up our header objects. Our first one will be an object with ID employee and title employee. Then we'll have an object with ID Sunday and title Sunday. Next object has an ID of Monday and a title of Monday. Next we'll have an object with ID Tuesday and title Tuesday. Then we'll have an object with ID Wednesday and title Wednesday. Next is an ID Thursday and a title Thursday. Next object has ID Friday and title Friday. Next we'll have an object with ID Saturday and title Saturday. Then we'll have an object with ID approve and title approve. And finally we'll have an ID with deny and the title of deny. Let's go ahead and do it for all of the column headers for our table. Next, let's go ahead and set up some more state. So let's go ahead and say const denied timesheet and set denied timesheet is equal to use state of a number 0. Let's go and import our use state. Let's also go ahead and come below here. We also need to go ahead and store the denial message. Let's go ahead and say const denial message. Set denial message is equal to use state of a string and set it as an empty string to start. Now let's get into our logic. First, let's go ahead and set up a const handle deny clicked is equal to an error function. Inside of our function parameters, let's go and pass in an E, which is a react.mouse event on an HTML button element. Let's come in here. Just to be safe, we're going to go ahead and call e.preventDefault first. Then we'll need the ID of the timesheet. So to do that, we're going to say const ID is equal to plus e.currentTarget.id.split. Inside the split, we're going to include a dash. Then we're going to get the index 1 inside that array. Next, we're going to go ahead and check if the denied timesheet is equal to the ID. If this is the case, we already have this open. So let's go ahead and call set denied timesheet to 0 to reset it. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and call set denied timesheet to the ID. This is more or less just going to allow us to go ahead and open up the message and reasoning for denying. That way we can go ahead and pass in that message. Next, we need to go ahead and set up a handler for typing in the message. So let's go ahead and say const handle denial message change is equal to an error function. Inside of the function parameters, let's go and pass in an E, which is a react.change event on an HTML text area element. Let's open up the function. It's going to be really simple. All we're going to go ahead and do is set denial message to e.currentTarget.value. Looks good. Now let's go ahead and handle the approvals and denials. First, we'll go ahead and do with the approval. So let's go ahead and say const handle approval is equal to an error function. Let's come inside of the parameter here. Let's go ahead and pass in an E, which is a react.mouse event on an HTML button element. Let's go and open this up. Let's go ahead and say e.preventDefault. Once again, to get the ID, we're going to go ahead and say const ID is equal to plus e.currentTarget.id.split. We're going to go ahead and split it by dash. And we're going to go ahead and get index 1 of that array. Then we're going to go ahead and check to make sure employee exists. Now, if our manager is in fact logged in when we're on this page, we're going to go ahead and say const payload is a review timesheet payload equal to an object. Let's go ahead and import our review timesheet payload here. And let's go ahead and set up the payload object. So here we'll say approver is employee. We'll go ahead and set our timesheet ID to the ID that we got. Status will be approved, and our message will be set to null. There we go. That looks good for our payload. Then we can come down here and call payService.review timesheets. Inside, let's go and pass in the payload and the timesheets. That looks good. Now, this is one of those situations where you definitely could have just combined these into one and be like handle review or something. I just like to split it apart to make it look a little bit nicer. But you could definitely add a little bit of logic in here, pass in some other things and kind of determine what's what, but it is what is. So now let's go ahead and handle denial. So below here, let's go ahead and say const handle submit denial is equal to an error function. Inside of our parameters, let's go and pass in E, which is a react.mouse event on an HTML button element. Let's go and open up our function here. Let's go ahead and say e.preventDefault. And we're going to do the same exact thing for the ID. So let's go ahead and say const ID is equal to plus e.currentTarget.id.split on the hyphen and then grab the first index. Then once again, we'll go ahead and check for if the employee is logged in and loaded. If they are, once again, we'll say const payload is a review timesheet payload equal to an object. And inside of our object, we'll say approver is employee. Hindsight, we probably should call the reviewer, but it is what it is. We'll go ahead and say timesheet ID is ID. The status will be denied and our message will be denial message. Payload looks good. Let's come outside of it. Let's go ahead and call payService.review timesheet. And once again, let's go and pass in payload and timesheets. There you go. As I mentioned, you guys could combine these two, but it is what it is. So now we should be ready to go ahead and start working inside of our HTML here. So let's go inside of our table, and above our body, let's go ahead and pass in a table header component. Let's go and import this component. And then inside of here, let's go and set our columns equal to our review timesheet columns. Then let's go and open up our T body. Inside the T body, let's go and set up a set of curly braces and then say timesheets.map each timesheet. Inside here, let's go ahead and return. Inside the return, let's go and set up a set of fragments. Inside the fragments, let's go ahead and render a table row. Let's go and make sure we import our table row here. And then let's go ahead and just make this a little bit cleaner. Inside the table row, let's go ahead and set the ID equal to backticks timesheet $ curly brace timesheet ID. And this is while we're splitting the ID by dash and getting index 1, because that's how we're going to get our timesheet. And then we're going to go ahead and set hover equal to false. Now let's come inside of our table row. Inside the table row, let's go ahead and set up a TD. And then we're going to go and have curly braces, timesheet.employee.firstname. We'll have curly braces with a space in it. Then we'll have curly braces with timesheet.employee.lastname. Then let's come below this TD. And now we're going to go ahead and do curly braces. And we're going to go ahead and say timesheet.hours.map through each hour. Go and open this up, scroll down to give ourselves a little bit of space. Let's set up our return statement in here. Inside this return statement, let's go ahead and return a TD with a key equal to hour.id. And then inside, let's go ahead and do curly braces, hour.hours, and then space hours. Then let's come outside of our hours map and set up another TD. Inside, let's go ahead and have a button component. Let's go and import our button, make sure it comes from our button component, and then let's open this up to make it a little bit better. In here, we're going to go ahead and type equal to secondary. We'll go ahead and say ID is equal to curly braces, backticks approved $ curly brace timesheet.id. And here our handle click will equal to handle submit approval. Inside, let's go ahead and say approve for the text. Then let's come below this TD. Let's set up another TD. In here, let's go and have another button component. And then inside this button, let's go ahead and say type is equal to error. The ID will equal to backticks deny $ curly brace timesheet.id. And the handle click will equal to handle deny clicked. Now inside of our button, let's go ahead and have the text deny. There we go. Then we're going to come outside of our table row, set up a set of curly braces, and we're going to say timesheet ID is equal to denied timesheet and. Let's go and give ourselves some more space here. If this is the case, we're going to go ahead and render another table row. Inside here, let's go and say ID is equal to backticks edit $ curly brace timesheet ID, and hover will equal to false. Inside, let's go ahead and have a TD with a col span of 10 and a class name equal to width full. Inside, let's go and have a div with a class name with space between. And inside, we'll go ahead and create another div with a class name of width-full. Inside this, we're going to go ahead and make a placeholder for our component we're going to create next. So let's go ahead and say fragments and then form text area. Then outside of our width full, let's go ahead and have another button component. Inside the button, let's set type to error. ID will equal to backticks denial $ curly brace timesheet.id. We'll set the width equal to 33%. And we'll set handle click equal to handle submit denial. Now inside the button itself, let's go ahead and render submit reason for denial. Let's go ahead and save that. Everything looks good. I'm not sure where the error is because we're not using handle denial message yet. That is fine because we do not have the actual form text area to deal with that. So that's the final thing we need to go ahead and do. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up this section here. In the next section, we'll go ahead and create a new component for this form text area. And finally wrap up this review timesheet and hopefully be able to go ahead and see all of our timesheets and review them for the manager. We're now ready to go ahead and create this form text area component. So to do that, let's go ahead and open up our Explorer here. We want to go ahead and open up our form. Let's go ahead and make a new file, and we'll go ahead and call this form text area, area.tsx. Let's go ahead and open this up. Inside here, let's go ahead and start out by importing the form.css. Then we're going to go ahead and declare a new interface for our props. So let's go and say interface form text area props. Inside our props, we're going to go ahead and include a label of type string. We'll include a name of type string, placeholder of type string, content of type string, an optional width of type string, an optional height of type string, and a handle input, which is an arrow function and returns void. And then inside of the function parameter, it's going to go ahead and pass in E, which is a React.change event on an HTML text area element. That should do it for our props. Let's come below and let's go and say export const form text area as a React.fc arrow function. Let's come behind our React.fc and let's go ahead and include our form text area props inside of the angled brackets. Inside of our function parameters, let's go ahead and include a set of curly braces. And then inside here, let's go ahead and include label. We'll include name, placeholder, content, width equal to fit-content. height equal to fit dash content, and finally handle input. Let's go and open up our function here. And the first thing we need to go ahead and do is set up our return statement. Inside the return statement, let's go ahead and return a div. And inside of our div, let's go ahead and declare a label. And the label of HTML4 equal to name. We'll say class name is equal to employee management form label. Then we'll go ahead and close out the label. Inside the label, let's go ahead and include curly braces and label from our props. Then let's come below our label and go ahead and declare a text area. Let's go and open this up to set in some props. First, we'll say ID equal to name. Next, we'll say the class name is equal to employee management form text area and employee management form border. Name will equal to name. Placeholder will equal to placeholder. On input will be equal to handle input. Value will equal to content. And style will equal to an object with height and width. Looks good to go for our text area here. We don't have any errors. So now we can go ahead and hop into our form CSS and actually style up the new classes in here. Let's go ahead and open up this. Go into our form.css. Let's come to the bottom here. First, let's go ahead and declare the employee management form text area. Inside, we're going to say padding is 0.5 rem, 0.5 rem. Background color will be var -- background. Border radius will be var -- border large. We want to set resize to none. Word wrap will be break word. And finally, let's set overflow Y to auto. That's looking good. Next, let's go ahead and set up the employee management form text area focus. And here, we just want to go ahead and make sure there's no ugly focus whenever you click on it or outline when you click on it. So let's go and say outline none. And finally, let's come below and go ahead and declare employee management form text area placeholder. And here, let's go ahead and set the color to var -- border color. And let's set the font weight to 400. That looks good. Let's go ahead and save that up. And now we should be able to go ahead and hop back into our timesheet table and put this to use. So let's go ahead and hop in here. Go into our timesheet table component, which is right here, review timesheet table. And then here we have our form text area. And actually, let's close out of this. We have our form text area. Let's go ahead and delete this. And let's actually go ahead and put in a form text area component. Let's go ahead and import our form text area component here. And let's go ahead and open this up to make a little bit of space. First, we'll go ahead and say label is equal to enter reason for denial. We'll set the name equal to denial. Placeholder will be reason for denial. The content will be denial message. We'll set the width equal to 50%. And finally, our handle input will equal to handle denial message change. That looks good. The error went away, and that should actually go ahead and wrap up all of the work inside of our review timesheet table itself. Next up, we need to go ahead and do a little bit more work inside of our review timesheet page to actually go ahead and get all of those timesheets and all that stuff, then actually go ahead and review it. So let's go ahead and hop over there and get to work. As mentioned in the end of the last section, let's go ahead and close out of a couple of things here. Let's open up our Explorer and go back into our review timesheets page here. And now what we want to go ahead and do is instead of having this review timesheet card here, we want to actually go ahead and replace that, but we also need to do a little bit more logic. So first thing I want to go ahead and do is bring in some more state from our use global context. Let's go ahead and add employees here. Let's go ahead and also add timesheets. And finally, we also want pay service. Now that we have all of that in here, let's go ahead and come below. And we need a way to actually fetch the employees in the timesheets. So let's go ahead and set up a use effect. Let's go ahead and import our use effect here. Go ahead and make it a little bit more pretty. There we go. Then inside of the use effect array, let's go ahead and include the employee. And then if the employee is logged in, let's go ahead and call the pay service.fetch timesheets by manager. And then inside the function call, let's go ahead and pass in the employees that we fetched earlier. There we go. Looks good. Now that we have all of our timesheets, let's go ahead and get rid of this empty fragment here for the placeholder. And let's go ahead and render a review timesheet table. Let's go ahead and import our review timesheet table here. And then inside, let's go ahead and say timesheets are equal to timesheets from our state. And now if we save, we shouldn't have any more errors. And that should be everything we need for our review timesheets page. So now all we need to go ahead and do is hop back into the front end and just make sure we can go through the motions of fetching all of the employees, making sure we can go ahead and review them and all of that good stuff. So to do that, let's go ahead and hop into the front end and go through some motions here to get some setup because I refreshed the server again and we can go ahead and start actually looking at our timesheets. So the first thing we're going to go ahead and do is let's go ahead and log into the admin and create another employee. So admin employee at company.com. We'll go ahead and put in PASS here, log in. Cool. So right now we have the manager and the employee one. Let's go ahead and create a new employee. So we'll go ahead and say employee and we'll just call them 2. Contact number, I believe that we're up to 3 3s. So 123, 123, 1234, just a bunch of 4s. Employee's fine. They'll go ahead and report to manager. Whoops, make sure you spell manager right. Manager employee at company.com. Hourly, and the pay will be like $30 or something. Let's go ahead and create new employee. I'm gonna go ahead and copy their email and password so I have access to this. I'll be right back. There we go. We're good to go. Let's go ahead and close out of there. So now let's go ahead and set up some timesheets. So I'm gonna go ahead and close out of here. Let's go ahead and log into employee1 at company.com and then go ahead and say PASS. Go and log in. Now let's go ahead and go to our timesheets. Let's go ahead and just fill out one with overtime. So let's say we worked 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours, and 4 hours. Let's go ahead and save the changes. Let's go ahead and submit. There we go. We can see it submitted. Looks good. Now let's also go ahead and do that for the employee 1 or 2, I'm sorry. So let's go ahead and come back in here. Go and log in as, employee, maybe, 2 at company.com. Hopefully I didn't typo. Let's go and copy their temporary password that I had below and paste that in, log in, go to timesheets. Let's go ahead and just do regular 40 hours, 8, 8, 8, and 8. Save changes and submit. There we go. That one's also submitted. Now let's go ahead and log out. Obviously it doesn't work, so just do this. Now let's go ahead and log in as manager employee at company.com and then PASS, log in. Now we can see our reports 1 and 2. If we go to employee timesheets, you can see we have our timesheets ready for review. Employee 1 has 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours, and 4 hours. And then employee 2 has just 8 hours across the board. So for employee 2, let's go ahead and approve this because they only worked 40 hours. It goes away because we updated it. Here, let's click deny. Then for deny reason, we'll say no overtime this week, for example. Then we can go ahead and submit reason for denial. It goes away. So now we can go ahead and log back into employee 1 and we'll see that's denied. Let's go ahead and go into employee 1 at company, maybe.com. And then we'll go ahead and log in PASS, log in, go to timesheets. You can see denied, and then the reasoning is no overtime this week. So let's go ahead and put this back to 0. I must have messed up. I put a 4 there instead of there, but we'll go ahead and save changes and then submit once again. Now we can go ahead and come back into our manager. So let's go and log in to manager, manager, and then employee at company.com and go ahead and PASS to log in. Once again, employee timesheets. Now it shows 40 hours. Go ahead and approve. Let's just go ahead and see what it looks like whenever we log back into employee 1, just to see what it looks like whenever it's been approved. So let's go ahead and log out one more time here. Let's go ahead and hop back in to employee 1 at company.com and then go ahead and say PASS, log in. Now if we go to timesheets, you can see it's been approved and it's all good to go. So that's looking good. Now we're ready to go ahead and do the final thing, which is being able to actually preview pay stubs as well as create pay stubs with the admin account. So let's go ahead and hop back into the code and get the work done to be able to do that. Back inside our code base, the next thing we need to go ahead and do is create the pay stub and then our payroll preview DTO interfaces inside of our types.ts. So let's go ahead and just open this guy up here, close out of this. Let's go into our types.ts. Let's go ahead and start setting up these interfaces. So I'm going to come below our timesheet here. And let's first go ahead and say export interface payroll preview. And inside of a payroll preview, we're going to go ahead and have an employee of type string. We'll go ahead and have payment date of type date, and we'll have a gross pay of number. Below, let's go ahead and also set up the interface for pay stub. So let's go ahead and say export interface pay stub. Our pay stub will have ID of type number. We'll have pay date of date. We'll have employee of type employee. We'll have gross hours equal to a number. Gross pay will equal to a number. Regular hours, which is a number. Regular pay, which is a number. Overtime hours, which is a number. And finally, we'll have overtime pay, which is also a number. Let's go ahead and save our types file. And that should go ahead and do it for this. We're going to go ahead and close out this section. That's a little bit longer one. And we're going to go ahead and start up the next section, working inside of the global context and getting all the stuff set up. That way we have access to it throughout our entire application. As I just mentioned, let's go ahead and start setting up these new data types and whatnot inside of a global context. That way we have access to them throughout the entire application. So to do this, let's go ahead and open up here. Let's go into our global context. We'll go ahead and close out of types for now. And the first thing I need to go ahead and do is start setting up some new types inside of a global context type. Let's go ahead and come below our timesheets and let's go ahead and declare a payroll preview of type payroll preview array. Let's go ahead and import our payroll preview here. Next, let's go ahead and say payroll is of type paystub array. Let's go ahead and import our paystubs here. And finally, let's go ahead and say pay stubs is of type pay stub array. Here, our payroll is going to specifically be like this week's payroll that the admin can see. And then whenever we go ahead and load in like an employee or something, they'll have a list of pay stubs of their own that's going to be used for this guy. So next we need to go ahead and set up some more global reducers. So let's go ahead and come below our update timesheets. Let's go ahead and declare update payroll preview, which is an arrow function and returns void. Inside of the function parameters, let's go ahead and pass in preview of type payroll preview array. Then let's go ahead and come below this one. Let's go ahead and declare an update payroll, which is going to be a arrow function that returns void. Inside of this function, let's go ahead and pass in a payroll of type pay stub array. And finally, let's go ahead and declare an update pay stubs, which is an arrow function and returns void. Once again, inside the parameters, let's go ahead and pass in pay stubs, which is a pay stub array. That all looks good. Let's go ahead and come into our global context provider now. Start setting up our state. First, let's go ahead and say const payroll preview and set payroll preview is equal to use state of type payroll preview array equal to an empty array. Let's come below here and let's go ahead and declare const payroll and set payroll is equal to a use state of type paystub array equal to an empty array. Finally, let's go ahead and say const paystubs and set paystubs is equal to a use state of a paystub array equal to an empty array. Now that we have our state set up, let's come down to our global reducers here and let's go ahead and start by saying const update payroll preview is equal to an arrow function. Inside the parameters, let's go ahead and pass preview of type payroll preview array. Let's open up the function here, and inside, let's go ahead and say set payroll preview to that preview. Next, let's come below and let's go ahead and declare our const update payroll, which is equal to an arrow function. Inside of the function parameters, let's go ahead and pass a payroll of type paystub array. Then we can open up our function and call set payroll to that payroll we passed in. And finally, let's go ahead and declare our const update paystubs equal to an arrow function. Once again, let's come inside the parameters. Let's go ahead and pass in paystubs, which is equal to a paystub array. Inside the function, let's go ahead and say set paystubs to those paystubs. That looks good. Next, let's come into our reducers here. First, let's go ahead and add in our update payroll preview. We'll go ahead and add in our update payroll. And finally, go ahead and add in our update paystubs. And that is good for reducers. And finally, we need to go ahead and come into our value and pass those in. We're going to go ahead and come below our timesheets. Let's go ahead and include our payroll preview. We'll go ahead and include our payroll. And finally, our pay stubs. Let's go ahead and make sure we save this. We should have all of our errors taken care of now. So that should go ahead and do it for everything we need inside of our global context here. Next up, we need to go ahead and go through and set up all the functionality to be able to actually run the payroll and get the pay stubs for the employees. So in the next section, let's go ahead and hop into the pay service and set up all that functionality. As I mentioned at the end of the last section, we're now ready to go ahead and hop into the pay service. Let's go ahead and open up our Explorer and hop into the pay service. And the first thing we need to go ahead and do is add in some new functions and state. So let's go ahead and come below our timesheet error and let's go ahead and include a loading payroll, which is of type Boolean. Let's also go ahead and include a payroll error of type Boolean. And then let's go ahead and set up a couple new actions. So let's come below our review timesheet. Let's go ahead and set up a preview payroll, which is an arrow function and returns void. And let's also go ahead and set up a run payroll, which is an arrow function and returns void. That looks good. Now let's go ahead and update our reducers so we can actually update our payroll and whatnot. So after our update timesheets, let's also go ahead and include our update payroll preview. We also want to go ahead and include the update payroll as well. And now that we have ways to update these pieces of state inside of our global context, let's come below our state here. Let's go ahead and declare a const loading payroll and set loading payroll equal to use state of type Boolean and set to false. Let's also go ahead and declare const payroll error and set payroll error is equal to use state of Boolean equal to false. And now let's go ahead and make use of the state down here. So let's go ahead and scroll down. Let's come below our review timesheet and let's go ahead and say const preview payroll is equal to async arrow function. Inside the function, let's go ahead and set up a try block and a catch block. Inside the catch, let's start out by saying console.log just to make the linter happy. Then we'll also go ahead and say set payroll error to true. Now let's come back into the try and let's go ahead and say set loading payroll to true. And we'll also go ahead and say set payroll error to false. Next up, let's go ahead and perform a request. So let's go ahead and say const res is equal to await request.get. Inside the request, let's go ahead and make that to /payroll/preview. And if we successfully get this request, let's go ahead and call update payroll preview with res.data. Now let's go ahead and set up a finally block. And inside the finally, let's go ahead and call set loading payroll to false. That looks good. Now let's come below our preview payroll and let's go ahead and declare const run payroll, which is equal to an async arrow function. Once again, let's set up a try catch. Inside the catch, let's go in console.log and we'll go ahead and say set payroll error to true. Now let's come back into the try. Let's go ahead and say set loading payroll to true. And we'll go ahead and say set payroll error to false. Let's go ahead and make our request. So we'll go ahead and say const res is equal to await request.get. And here we'll go ahead and make the request to /payroll/run. If the request succeeds, let's go ahead and say update payroll with res.data. Then let's go ahead and set up a finally block after the catch. And then finally, let's go ahead and call set loading payroll to false. Let's go ahead and give that a good save. Now we have our logic and our state for loading and running payrolls. Let's go ahead and come down here below our timesheet error. And let's go ahead and return loading payroll. We'll also go ahead and return our payroll error. Then let's come below our review timesheet. Here, let's go ahead and return our preview payroll. And finally, we'll go ahead and return our run payroll. Once again, let's go and give this a save, make sure there's no errors or anything, and it's looking good. Now we're ready to go ahead and start creating some payrolls and things like that. So let's go ahead and work on that in the next section. Now that we have the ability to preview and run the payroll, let's go ahead and set up a component to display the pay stubs that are generated. So to do this, let's go ahead and open up our Explorer. Let's go into our components, make a new folder. We're going to go ahead and call this payroll card. And then inside of our payroll card, let's go ahead and make a new file, payroll card.tsx. And let's also go ahead and make a new file called payroll card.css. Let's go ahead and close out of our Explorer here. Let's go and open up our payroll card. We can also close out of our pay service in our global context. First up, let's go and import our payroll card.css. Then let's go ahead and say export const payroll card is a react.fc arrow function. Inside the function, let's go ahead and set up a return statement. And inside the return, let's go ahead and include our information card. Let's be sure to import our information card. Then let's go ahead and open this up. This needs a child component. So let's also go ahead and render a div with a class name of space between. Now that everything is happy, let's go ahead and set up our state and our actions here. So first off, we need to go ahead and bring in some things from global context. So let's go ahead and say const payroll preview. Payroll pay service is equal to global context as global context type. Let's go and import our use global context. Let's also go ahead and import our global context type. We also need a piece of local state to know whether or not we're previewing the payroll or actually submitting the pay stubs. So let's also go ahead and say const previewing and set previewing is equal to use state of type boolean equal to false. Let's go and import our use state here. Looks good. Now we have a couple actions which are going to be submitting the preview and submitting the actual payroll. Let's start out by going ahead and handling the preview. So let's go ahead and say const handle preview is equal to an arrow function. Inside the parameters, let's go ahead and pass e, which is a react.mouse event on our HTML button element. Let's go ahead and open up our function here. Let's first go ahead and say e.prevent default just for good measure. Then let's go ahead and call payservice.preview payroll. And finally, I want to go ahead and set previewing to true. That's all we need to go ahead and do for previewing the payroll. Let's go ahead and come below and let's go ahead and deal with submitting the actual payroll. So let's go ahead and say const handle submit payroll is equal to an arrow function. Once again, inside the parameters, let's go ahead and pass e, which is a react.mouse event on HTML button element. Let's go ahead and open up our function. Let's first call e.prevent default just for good measure. Then we'll go ahead and call payservice.run payroll. And finally, we'll call set previewing with false. That also looks good. And now that we have a way to run each of these, let's go ahead and hop back into a return statement to get to work. So we're going to go back inside of our space between div, and we're going to go ahead and make an H5 that says payroll colon. Then below, we're going to go ahead and have a button. Let's go ahead and import our button component here. Let's go and open it up to set some props. So inside, we're going to go ahead and set type as secondary. Let's go ahead and set the width to 25%. And we'll go ahead and set handle click equal to handle submit preview payroll. Then let's come inside the button itself, and inside we're going to go ahead and have preview payroll. Next, let's come below the button and declare another button. Once again, let's open this button up. We'll go ahead and have type equal to primary, width will equal to 25%, and handle click will equal to handle submit payroll. Then inside the button itself, let's go ahead and say, run payroll. That looks good. Now I want to go ahead and come outside of our space between div. Let's go ahead and set up another div with the class name of payroll card scroll container. Inside our div, let's go ahead and have some curly braces. And we're going to go ahead and check for payservice.loading payroll ? And then we'll go ahead and render an empty fragment or an empty fragment. Let's go ahead and clean this up just so it looks a little bit better. So we'll go ahead and bring this down, bring that down, bring that down, and then bring this over. If we are loading, let's go ahead and delete this fragment and render a loading component. And then let's go ahead and import our loading component. Otherwise, let's go ahead and go inside of this fragment and let's go ahead and render payroll table. And that should go ahead and do it for the time being. Now that our payroll card is primarily set up, we just need to go ahead and create this placeholder a little bit later on. Let's go ahead and navigate to the payroll.css and set the styling for our singular class. So here inside the file, let's go ahead and declare the selector for our payroll card scroll container. Inside here, let's go ahead and say width is 100%. Height will be fit content. Our max height will be set to 37.5 rem. And let's go ahead and set overflow wide to auto. Let's go ahead and save that up. Looks good. And now that should go ahead and be everything that we need to do for our payroll card. Before we go ahead and completely wrap this up though, we need to go ahead and create a table to go ahead and display all of those pay stubs. So in the next section, let's go ahead and deal with that. For now, that should wrap up everything for the payroll card. Now we need to set up the component to replace the payroll table fragment. So let's go ahead and open up our project here, and let's go ahead and go into our components, make a new folder. We'll go ahead and call this payroll and table. And then inside the payroll table, let's go ahead and make a new file. Let's go ahead and call this payroll table.tsx. We're not going to need a CSS for this one, so let's go ahead and close out. Just gives us a little bit of headroom here for imports. And first off, let's go ahead and declare an interface for some props. Let's go ahead and say interface payroll table props. Inside of our payroll table props, let's go ahead and declare a preview of type boolean. We will have a display employee of type boolean. Let's also include preview stubs, which is a payroll preview array. Let's go ahead and import our payroll preview array here. And then finally, let's go ahead and say paystubs is a paystub array. Let's go and import our paystub array. Looks good. Let's come down below and let's go ahead and say export const payroll table is a react.fc arrow function. Then after the react.fc, let's go ahead and include our angled brackets payroll table props to include our props. Then let's come inside of our function parameters and go ahead and include our curly braces and then include preview, display employee, preview stubs, and finally pay stubs. Let's go ahead and open up our function here. Inside, let's go and set up our return statement. Inside the return statement, let's go ahead and render a table component. Let's go and import our table component here. And let's go and open it up. It's going to need a child for the time being. So let's go ahead and just render an empty fragment. Looks good. Now we can go ahead and start bringing in our state and whatnot. The first thing that we need to go ahead and do is declare a const preview columns is equal to an array. Let's go and open this up. The first thing that we need to go ahead and do is include an object with an ID paydate and a title of paydate. Let's next include an object with ID employee and title employee. And then finally, let's go ahead and include an object with gross pay and title gross pay. That should do it for all the columns inside of our preview table. But now we also need to go ahead and declare one for the payroll. So let's go and say const employee payroll columns, which is equal to an array. Let's go and open this one up. First, we'll have an object with an ID of paydate and title of paydate. Next, we'll have an object with an ID gross hours and title of total hours worked. Next, let's include an object with an ID regular hours and title of regular hours worked. Next, an object with an ID of regular pay and title of regular pay. Then we'll have an object with an ID of overtime hours and title of overtime paid hours. The next column will be ID overtime pay and title of overtime pay. Then we'll go ahead and have an ID of gross pay and a title of total pay. That should go ahead and do it for all the columns we need for a regular payroll. And then finally, we need to go ahead and declare one more for whenever we're on the admins page. So let's go ahead and say const admin payroll columns. Inside here, we're going to go have an object with an ID of employee and a title of employee. And then let's also include all of the columns from the employee payroll column. So let's go ahead and say ... employee payroll columns. That should do it for all the different columns that we're going to need for different tables. Now let's go ahead and set up a function to determine which columns to actually show on the table. So let's go ahead and say const determine columns is equal to an arrow function. Inside the function, let's first see if we are in the preview mode by saying if preview. If this is the case, let's go ahead and return preview columns. Then if we're not previewing and we want to display the employee column, let's go ahead and return the admin payroll columns. Then otherwise, if we aren't previewing and we're not displaying the employee information, let's go ahead and return the employee payroll columns. Looks good. Now none of the payroll columns matter to us, just the determine columns because we're not using it, and then we'll use these in a second as well. Next, let's go ahead and set up a quick utility function to get the pay date properly. So let's go ahead and say const get pay date is equal to an arrow function. Inside our function parameters, let's go and pass in a date is of type date or string. Let's go and open up the function, and here let's go ahead and return a new date with the date that we passed into the parameter. On the new date object, let's go and call .toIsoString. On the toIsoString, let's go ahead and call .split and then t, and then let's only return the first index, or index 0 I should say, and that'll basically say, hey, let's split it at the time part and only return the date. And then finally, we need to go ahead and declare a format so we can format the dollars that they earn. So let's go ahead and say const format is equal to use format dollars. Inside of our function, let's go and pass in ENUS for the language, currency as a type, and USD. And let's go ahead and import our use format dollars here. Looks good. Let's give ourselves some space. Come down. Now we need to go ahead and determine what body we're going to display. So let's go ahead and say const render table body is equal to an arrow function. Once again, let's go and check to see if we're previewing. If we are previewing, let's go ahead and set up a return statement. And inside the return, we're going to go ahead and return a t-body. Inside the body, let's go ahead and include some curly braces. We're going to go and say preview stubs.map, and we're going to go ahead and get access to the pay stub and the index with IDX. Inside of our map function, let's go ahead and say const paydate is equal to get paydate. Into the function, we'll pass paystub.paymentDate. Then let's go and set up another return statement. In the return statement, let's go ahead and render a table row component. Let's go ahead and import our table row here. Looks good. Inside the table row, let's open this up so we have a little bit of space. Whoops, a little bit too far there. And inside, let's go ahead and declare the ID equal to backticks preview $$ curly brace IDX and hover equal to false. Inside the table, let's go ahead and display a TD with paydate. We'll have another TD with paystub.employee. And finally, we'll have one more TD that calls the format function with paystub.grosspay. There you go. So that's our preview. Then if we're not previewing, we'll come outside that if statement and set up another return statement. Inside this return statement, let's go ahead and return another body. Inside this t-body, let's go ahead and say paystubs.map through each paystub. Inside the map, let's go ahead and say const paydate is equal to get paydate with the paystub.paydate again. Then we'll set up our return statement. Inside our return statement, let's go ahead and have our table row component. Inside the table row, ID will equal to backticks paystub-paystub ID, and hover will equal to false. Inside the table row, let's first check to see if display employee is true. If that's the case, let's go ahead and display a TD with paystub.employee.email. Then below, let's go ahead and display a TD with paydate. Next, we'll have a TD with paystub.grosshours. Next, we'll display a TD with paystub.regularhours. Then we'll have a TD that calls format with paystub.regularpay. Then we'll have a TD with paystub.overtime hours. Then let's go ahead and have a TD that calls format with paystub.overtime pay. And finally, let's have one more TD that calls format with paystub.grosspay. That should go ahead and do it for everything we need to go ahead and render the different table bodies. Now we can go ahead and come back inside of our table here. And then above our empty fragments here, let's go ahead and declare a table header component. Let's go ahead and import our table header component here. There we go. And then inside, let's go ahead and say columns are equal to determine columns function. Next, let's go ahead and get rid of these empty fragments and set up some curly braces. And then inside those curly braces, let's go ahead and call the render table body function. Let's go ahead and give that a save. And that should go ahead and do it for setting up a payroll table. Now we just need to go ahead and include this into our payroll card. So let's go ahead and head back into our payroll card. Inside our payroll card, we need to go ahead and find where our payroll table fragment is. Let's go ahead and delete this. And let's actually go ahead and include the payroll table here. Let's go ahead and import that payroll table. And let's go ahead and start adding in the props. So first, let's go ahead and say preview is equal to previewing. Next, we'll go ahead and say display employee is equal to true. We'll say preview stubs is equal to payroll preview. And finally, we'll go ahead and say pay stubs is equal to payroll. There we go. Let's go ahead and save that up. And that should be everything we need to do for the payroll card. Now, what we need to go ahead and do is go into the admins page and actually add this in and then go through and test. So in the next section, we'll go ahead and do that, test it out, and make sure everything is looking good. As I mentioned at the end of the last section, now that we have wrapped up our payroll card, let's go ahead and add it to the admins manage employees page so they can go ahead and run the payroll preview and also run the real payroll. So let's go ahead and open up our Explorer. We can go ahead and navigate back to our manage employees page.tsx. And then here you basically just need to go ahead and add in the payroll card component. We're going to go ahead and come below the employees card. And let's just go ahead and include that payroll card. Let's go ahead and import that payroll card. And it's literally as simple as that. Now we should have it set up so that whenever we log in as an admin, we'll go ahead and see all of the employees, and then below that we should go ahead and see the options to run and preview the payroll. So let's go ahead and hop into the web browser and make sure that's working before we wrap up this section by setting up the ability for all the employees to see their pay stubs. So let's go ahead and log out. We should still have the timesheets from the last couple sections. Let's go and log in as admin employee at company.com, and let's go ahead and pass in pass. If this errors out, it might be because my computer went to sleep overnight between me recording these, so then I might still need to reset it and then recreate the pay stubs, but hopefully it just lets me log in. Awesome, it did let me log in. Again, we can see we have our manager, employee, and employee here. So now we can see our payroll table here, our card. Right now, we don't have anything in the payroll table. If we wanted to, we could probably hide this until it's like, hey, run the payroll to see this, but it is what it is. You guys can do that if you like. You can see we have two options here. We can either preview the payroll or we can run the payroll. So we go ahead and click preview payroll. Fingers crossed everything works. Terrific. You can go ahead and see we have the pay date, which is today. And then we also have all the employees as well as their gross pay. So that looks great. And then now, if this all looks good to them, we can see we have all the employees. It looks like their pay matches up. Really, how you supposed to note the pay? You could add another table to make sure, hey, the hourly rate's proper and stuff like that, but it is what it is. But if that looks good to you, you can go ahead and run the payroll, and now you can go ahead and see all the regular hours and stuff. So you can see admin is a salary, so he doesn't have any overtime, so on and so forth. Then if one of these two people had worked overtime and it got accepted, it'll go ahead and show the overtime hours and pay here. And then also, if they didn't get their timesheet submitted on time and you run the payroll, it wouldn't show up there. We could have tested that in theory, but on the back end, the logic looks for ones specifically that have been approved. So if it had been denied or not submitted at all and not approved, it wouldn't have shown up here. But luckily, all of our employees got paid on time. So that looks good. Now all we need to go ahead and do is wrap up this chapter of the course by adding the ability to see the employees' pay stubs whenever they go to their managed self page. We're probably going to have to go through and set up some data on Postman to be able to see a bunch of them, but we can also do that as well. So let's go and hop back into the code. We're going to go ahead and start on the pay service and fetch those stubs, and then do some work inside of our managed self page and get all of this wrapped up. Back inside of VS Code here in the pay service, we need to go ahead and first declare a new type or a new function inside of our pay service type. So to do that, let's go and say fetch pay stubs by email is equal to an error function that returns void. Inside the function parameters, let's go ahead and pass in an email of type string. There we go. That looks good for the type. And then we need to go ahead and bring in a way to update the employee's pay stubs. So inside of our reducers object here, let's go ahead and also include update pay stubs. Looks good. And then now let's go ahead and come down here and start setting up our function or reducer here. And here, let's go ahead and say const fetch pay stubs by email is equal to an async error function. Inside of the parameter, let's go and pass in that email string. And then let's open up the function and set up a try catch. Inside the catch, let's go ahead and say console.log e to make the linter happy. And we'll also go ahead and say set payroll error to true. Now back up inside the try, let's go ahead and say set loading payroll to true. And we'll go ahead and have set payroll error to false. We're going to go and say const date is equal to new date. And now let's go ahead and set up our request. So let's go ahead and say const res is equal to request.get. And this one's going to be a little bit of a mouthful, but we're going to go ahead and make the request to /payroll/view $curly brace email, and then question mark year is equal to $curly brace date.get full year. So basically, whenever we're getting all of our pay stubs on this page, we're just going to go ahead and get them for this specific year. You guys can change this logic if you want to get all of them, but this is just what I decided to do. And then finally, if this succeeds, let's go ahead and say update pay stubs with res.data. And then let's go ahead and set up a finally block. And inside the finally block, let's go ahead and say set loading payroll to false. That looks good for our reducer. Let's come down below our run payroll, and let's go ahead and include that fetch pay stubs by email. Let's go and give that a save, make sure there's no errors, and everything is looking good here. That should go ahead and do it for our pay service. Now all we need to go ahead and do is set up the ability to fetch those pay stubs inside of our managed self page and actually go ahead and display them. So let's go ahead and do that in the next section. We are now ready to go ahead and fetch the employee's pay stubs and display them inside of their managed self page. So let's go ahead and navigate back to the managed self page. So here we go, managed self. And then what we want to go ahead and do is first we need to go ahead and update our use global context import here. We want to go ahead and include the pay stubs. We also want to go ahead and include the pay service. Now that we have those, let's go ahead and come down here. We want to go ahead and set up a use effect. And let's go ahead and import our use effect here. And then come inside of our dependency array, and we want to watch the employee. And let's come inside of our use effect. We want to go ahead and check to make sure if the employee actually exists inside our context. And then if the employee does exist, we want to go ahead and say payservice.fetch paystubs by email. And then inside the function, let's go and pass in the employee.email. That should go ahead and fetch the pay stubs and store them in our global context. Before we actually display them, we need to make a small update to our pay information card. So let's go ahead and hop into the pay information card component really quick. So open up our Explorer. We'll go into our pay information card right here, go into pay information card. And then inside of our props here, let's go ahead and also include a display pay stubs of Boolean. Let's also go ahead and include a paystubs of type paystub array. Let's go ahead and import our paystub array like so. And then we need to also go ahead and include these inside of the object in the function parameters here. So let's also go ahead and include the display paystubs as well as the paystubs. Looking good. Let's go and save that. And now I need to go ahead and do a little bit more work to determine the total earnings that they've made. I'm going to go ahead and come above this estimate yearly pay. And let's go ahead and say const total earnings is equal to set total earnings equal to use state of a number 0. Let's go and import our use state here. And then let's come below our function and let's go and say use effect. Let's go ahead and import our use effect here and go ahead and bring this down. And inside of the dependency array, we want to go ahead and watch for the pay stubs. And let's also watch for paystub.length to change. Now, if either of these change, let's go ahead and say set total earnings is equal to an arrow function. Inside the arrow function, let's go ahead and say let total equal to 0. And then we're going to go and say paystub.forEach ps of type paystub. And we'll go ahead and say total plus equal ps.grosspay. After we're done adding up the total, let's come below the for each and let's go ahead and return that total. And that should do it for setting our total earnings for the year. Now we should be ready to go ahead and start working on displaying that. Now we want to come outside the div with a name column, so it's right here. And let's go ahead and set up a set of curly braces. And we're going to go ahead and check to see if display pay stubs is true. If that's the case, let's go ahead and set up a div. Inside the div, let's go ahead and div with the class name of row and pay information earnings. Inside of our pay information earnings, let's go ahead and have an H4 with year-to-date earnings. And then we'll have an H6 that calls the format function with total earnings. Then let's come outside of our earnings div. So right here, let's go ahead and make another div with the class name of pay information scroll container. And then inside of our pay information scroll container, let's go ahead and render a payroll table. Let's go and import the payroll table really quickly here. And we need to go ahead and set up our props. Preview equal to false. Let's set display employee equal to false. Preview stubs will be equal to an empty array, and pay stubs will equal to pay stubs. Let's go and save that up. That should do it for this for now, but we need to go ahead and import a CSS file, and we need to actually go ahead and style this. So let's go ahead and import ./payinformationcard.css. Now this is going to be mad at us for the time being because we haven't created it. So let's go ahead and come into our file explorer here, make a new file, go ahead and make our pay information, card.css. There we go. Let's go and come in here and let's go ahead and style this. So let's go ahead and start it by saying .pay information earnings. Inside of our earnings div, let's go ahead and have an align items of center and a gap of 0.75 rem. Then let's come below and let's go ahead and say .pay information scroll container. Inside our scroll container, let's have a width of 100%. We'll have a height of fit content. We'll set the max height to 18.75 rem. And finally, our overflow Y will be auto. That looks good, and that should do it for our pay information CSS. Now we just need to go through and update a couple of components that is going to be affected by this pay information card change. So first, let's hop into the employee table to fix that. So let's go ahead and come into our employees table, open this up, and now you can see that it's mad at us because we don't have information. Let's come behind the location, and let's go ahead and say pay stubs is equal to an empty array. And then we'll go ahead and have display pay stubs is equal to false. Let's go ahead and give that a save. So whenever we are displaying our employees in like the admin page or the manager page, we won't actually display their pay stubs. We only want to display it on their personal page. And now we're also going to go ahead and have an issue inside of our manage self page. Let's go ahead and hop in here as well. And then let's come behind the location. Here, let's go ahead and say display pay stubs is equal to true. Then we'll go ahead and pass in the pay stubs is equal to pay stubs. And now fingers crossed, all of our errors should be done. And now let's go ahead and do a quick test of everything. So to test everything, let's go ahead and open up Postman first and generate some pay stubs that way we can scroll through. So here in Postman, I don't care. We're going to go ahead and log in as the admin. So let's go ahead and find the login admin, log in as the admin. And then we want to go ahead and first generate data for timesheets. So we'll do for 2, that's fine. And we'll do ID 3, that's fine. So this should be employee 1. Let's go ahead and generate. And then we need to go ahead and copy all of these pay stubs. Let's go ahead and do that. Copy them. And then let's go ahead and generate data for the pay stubs. All we gotta do now is just copy all of these. And let's go ahead and paste them in here as well. And paste it there. And then send. And that should go ahead and generate a whole bunch of pay stubs with random overtime. And now we can go ahead and hop into our front end here. So here in the front end, of course, we reload the page. That's fine. So now let's go ahead and log into employee 1 at company.com. And then go ahead and say PASS. I think I typoed PASS, log in. There we go. And now you can see that they have their year-to-date earnings in all of the pay stubs. And we can kind of scroll through here, see all of them. Now, if we want to, we could probably sort these in a different way. So that might be something y'all want to look into, is like figure out like having a button up here that maybe like filters them or sorts them or whatever. So that's going to go ahead and do it for this chapter. Let's go ahead and kick it over to the outro. Then I'll see you guys in the final chapter of the course. This will wrap up the 5th chapter of the course. We set up the ability for the manager employee to review timesheets, then set up the logic surrounding running the payroll and generating pay stubs to keep track of what each employee is getting paid. On the front end, we set up a new page for managers to view the reports, as well as a new page for the managers to view a list of reports timesheets that needed reviewed, then set up the logic on the front end to allow the managers to interact and approve timesheets for the payroll. Finally, we set up the logic for admins to actually preview and run the payroll to generate the pay stubs with the React application. Once those pay stubs are generated, the admin could see all of the pay stubs, as well as the employees could also view their own pay stubs for the year inside of their managed self page. As mentioned earlier in the video, if you would like access to the entire course up front, including all of the code and materials which comes along with it, there's going to be 2 ways to achieve this. You can either purchase the course over at Udemy. I will have a link in the description below, and Udemy will be setting the prices as they see fit for the content, but I will attempt to run as many promotions / coupons on the course as I can. The second option is to subscribe to the course level membership on my channel. This will grant you immediate access to the entire course, plus access to the private GitHub repository with the code. This is going to be a flat $15, and you only need to be a member for a single month while this course is out to gain access, and then you can go ahead and decline to renew as you see fit. Of course, if neither of these options work for you, I will be incrementally uploading each chapter to YouTube, and you can go ahead and follow along completely for free. The only thing I ask if you are going to follow along for free is that you like and comment on the video. It will really help out the reach of the course. If you also want to go ahead and see more programming content similar to this, I would highly recommend subscribing. With that being said, I hope you join me in the next chapter of the course, where we should be going ahead and wrapping up everything for the rest of the course, which is going to go ahead and include implementing our OAuth 2 resource server over on the Spring Data side, and also setting up our JWTs and our refresh tokens. Then on the front end, what we're going to go ahead and do is go through and set up the ability to log out, as well as display to the employee whenever their session is timed out, and allow them to either refresh the session or log out. And finally, we'll be setting up some route guards to be able to make sure the employee doesn't go any places they're not supposed to. So with that all being said, this has been Ethan or Unencoder. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you all in the next video.